Story 1. My stepbrother returned at my stepfather's funeral, asking me to move out as the house was his. But when he got to know the will, he was angry. I'm Jake, 38 years old, and I never thought I'd be preparing for my stepfather's funeral. As I sit here sorting through old photographs and making arrangements, memories flood back like a tidal wave. It's strange how death can make you reflect on a lifetime of experiences, both good and bad. My mom, Sarah, married my stepfather, Richard, when I was 9 years old. I remember the wedding day as if it were yesterday. Mom looked beautiful in her simple white dress, her eyes shining with hope for a new beginning. Richard, on the other hand, wore a dark suit that seemed to emphasize his stern demeanor. Even on what should have been a joyous occasion, he maintained that serious expression that I would come to know all too well over the years. From the very start, Richard was a strict man. He always seemed to have a permanent frown etched on his face, especially when he looked at me. I often wondered if he resented having to take on the role of stepfather, or if he simply didn't know how to connect with a child that wasn't his own. Growing up with Richard wasn't easy. He criticized everything I did, from my grades to the way I dressed, even how I held my fork at dinner. His favorite phrase, one that I heard almost daily, was, "You need to work harder, or this cruel world will chew you up and spit you out." At the time, I thought he was just being mean, but now, looking back, I wonder if he was trying to prepare me for life in his own misguided way. His strictness extended to every aspect of our lives. During family gatherings, I had to sit up straight, use the right fork, and only speak when spoken to. Any deviation from his expectations was met with a sharp glare or a stern reprimand. Family outings, which should have been fun and relaxing, were more like military exercises than enjoyable trips. Richard would plan everything down to the minute, and heaven help us if we deviated from the schedule. I remember one vacation where we missed a turn and arrived at a museum 15 minutes late. Richard was in a foul mood for the rest of the day, muttering about wasted time and poor planning. When my stepbrother, Michael, was born 3 years after the wedding, everything changed. Suddenly, Richard had a son of his own, and it was painfully clear who the favorite was. He doted on Michael, showering him with affection and praise. I'd never seen Richard smile so much as he did when he held his newborn son. It was like a switch had been flipped, revealing a side of Richard the first never knew existed. I was angry and jealous. At 12 years old, I couldn't understand why Michael got all the love and attention while I only got criticism and stern looks. The contrast was stark and painful. Michael's accomplishments, no matter how small, were celebrated with enthusiasm. My own achievements, even when they were significant, were met with a nod and a comment about how I could do better next time. When I complained to Mom about the unfair treatment, she'd try to reassure me. "Richard loves you too, Jake," she'd say, her eyes pleading for me to understand, "It's just tough love. He wants you to be prepared for the world." But it didn't feel like love to me. It felt like constant disappointment, like I was forever falling short in Richard's eyes. As the years passed, our family dynamic shifted in ways I never expected. Mom got sick when I was 25, and we all rallied around her. Even then, Richard remained stoic, but I caught glimpses of tenderness when he thought no one was looking. I'd see him gently adjusting Mom's pillows or holding her hand when he thought I wasn't in the room. It was the first time I realized that Richard's inability to show affection might have been more about his own limitations than his feelings for us. When Mom died 2 years later, it felt like the glue holding our family together had dissolved. The funeral was a blur of tears and hushed condolences. Richard stood like a statue throughout the service, his face an unreadable mask. I wanted to reach out to him, to share our grief, but the wall between us felt insurmountable. Michael, then 21, moved out not long after Mom's death. He married his high school sweetheart, Emma, and started his own family. Suddenly, it was just me and Richard in that big house filled with memories. I considered moving out too, but something held me back. Maybe it was a sense of duty, or maybe deep down I was still that little boy hoping for some sign of approval from the man who had been my father figure for most of my life. Caring for Richard in his final years was challenging. He was as stubborn and critical as ever, fighting against the limitations his aging body imposed on him. There were days when the tension between us was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But there were also moments, brief flashes, when I thought I saw gratitude in his eyes. Like the time I stayed up all night with him during a bad bout of flu, or when I learned to cook his favorite meals as he became too weak to stand at the stove himself. But those moments were rare, and most of the time I felt like I was caring for a stranger who happened to live in my house. We existed in a state of uneasy truce, neither of us knowing quite how to bridge the gap that had grown between us over the years. I even never thought about getting into a relationship or getting married because of Richard's nature. I didn't want my girlfriend or wife to face the same thing which I was facing from him. Now Richard's gone at 65, taken by a heart attack that came suddenly in the night. As I prepare for his funeral, everyone's arriving to pay their respects. Michael showed up with Emma and their kids, 5-year-old Lily and 3-year-old Max. It's the first time I've seen him in years. He looks older, more serious, but there's still that air of entitlement about him that I remember from our childhood. The funeral was a somber affair. I stood there listening to people talk about what a great man Richard was, how he always put family first, how he was a pillar of the community. I wanted to laugh at the irony of it all. Did they know the same man I did? The Richard they described seemed like a stranger to me. After it was all over, as people were leaving, Michael pulled me aside for a moment. I thought maybe he wanted to reconnect, to share memories of our childhood, or to support each other in our grief. Instead, he hit me with a bombshell that left me reeling. "So, about the house," he said, his voice casual, as if we were discussing the weather. "I'll need you to move out by the end of the month." I stared at him, not comprehending. "What are you talking about?" He sighed, looking at me like I was being deliberately obtuse. "The house. Obviously, Dad left it to me. I'm his real son after all. You didn't think he'd leave it to you, did you?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All these years of caring for Richard, of trying to be the son he wanted, and this was how it ended. Part of me wanted to argue, to fight for what I felt I'd earned through years of dutiful care. But another part of me, the part that still felt like that 9-year-old boy desperate for approval, just wanted to retreat. "Fine," I said, my voice hollow. "I'll be out by the end of the month." As I watched Michael walk away, arm around Emma, kids running ahead, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss. Not just for Richard, but for the family I never really had, for the connection I'd always hoped would develop between Richard and me, but never did. I started packing that night, surrounded by boxes of memories I wasn't sure I wanted to keep. As I worked, sorting through years of accumulated possessions, I couldn't help but think that maybe Richard had been right all along. The world was cruel, and no matter how hard you worked, sometimes you still ended up with nothing to show for it. Update 1. It's been a week since I moved out of my childhood home. I'm staying with my Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, for now, trying to figure out my next steps. As I lie awake at night, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, I can't help but think about Michael and how we ended up here. Growing up, it was clear that Michael was the favorite child from the moment he was born. Richard doted on him in a way he never did with me. Birthday parties with all his friends invited, new toys just because, proud smiles when he brought home a good report card. All things I had longed for but never received. I remember one particular birthday when Michael was about 8. Richard rented out an entire arcade for him and his friends. I was 17 at the time, and I couldn't help but compare it to my own birthdays, which were usually marked with a quiet dinner and maybe a small gift. But as Michael grew older, something changed. The sweet little boy who used to follow me around asking to play turned into a sullen teenager who seemed to resent everyone and everything. He became rude, talking back to our parents and treating me like I was invisible. It was like watching a stranger take over my little brother's body. I remember one particular incident when he was about 16. We were having dinner, and Richard asked him about his grades. It was a normal question, the kind of thing Richard asked us both all the time. But this time, Michael exploded. He started yelling about how he was sick of the pressure, how he hated living under Richard's thumb. He stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. I expected Richard to be furious, to go after Michael and drag him back. But instead, he just sat there, looking older and sadder than I'd ever seen him. As he got older, Michael's behavior only worsened. He started dating a string of girls, each relationship ending messily. There were late nights, missed curfews, and shouting matches with Richard that shook the house. I tried to stay out of it, but it was impossible not to be affected by the constant tension. Richard tried to talk to him about respect and responsibility, but Michael just laughed it off. "You can't control me anymore," he'd say, and Richard would get this look on his face, a mixture of anger and hopelessness that I'd never seen before. Then came the day he showed up with Emma as his wife. None of us even knew he was seeing someone seriously, let alone planning to get married. He walked in with Emma, barely more than a teenager herself, and announced they'd eloped. I'll never forget the look on Richard's face. For once, he was speechless. Mom tried to smooth things over, welcoming Emma to the family, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. I could see Richard struggling to keep his composure, to find the right words to say to his son. Emma wanted to live independently, away from family interference, she said. So, just like that, Michael packed his bags and moved out. He promised to visit, to stay in touch, but those promises quickly fell by the wayside. Weeks turned into months without a word from him. When he did call, it was always brief, always with an undercurrent of tension. When Mom got sick, I thought surely he'd come back. But he didn't. He called occasionally, asking how she was doing, but always had an excuse for why he couldn't visit. Work was busy, the kids were sick, the car was in the shop. There was always something. I remember sitting by Mom's hospital bed, watching her eyes light up every time the phone rang, hoping it would be Michael. More often than not, it wasn't. The day Mom died, I was the one who had to call and tell him. He sounded genuinely upset, full of regret that he hadn't visited more often. He said he'd try to make it to the funeral, but in the end, he didn't show up, just a flower arrangement sent to the funeral home with a card expressing his condolences. I stood there at the funeral, feeling his absence like a physical pain, wondering how we drifted so far apart. And now here we are. The prodigal son returns, not out of love or duty, but for what he can get. It makes me angry, thinking about how he swooped in and took the house, acting like he had some right to it when he'd abandoned us years ago. I think about all the nights I spent caring for Richard, all the doctor's appointments I took him to, all the meals I cooked and the bills I paid. And for what? To be tossed aside like I never mattered at all. But just as I'm staggering under these bitter thoughts, my phone rings. It's Richard's lawyer, Mr. Thompson. He sounds serious, telling me he needs to discuss something important and asking me to come back to the house tomorrow. I'm not sure what to think. Part of me hopes there's been some mistake, that maybe I don't have to give up my home after all. But another part of me is afraid to hope, knowing how disappointed I've been in the past. As I hang up the phone, I can't help but wonder what tomorrow will bring. Whatever it is, I know one thing for sure. Nothing about this situation is going to be simple. I spend the rest of the night tossing and turning, my mind racing with possibilities. What could be so important that Mr. Thompson needs to see me in person? Is it possible that Richard left something for me after all? Or is this just going to be another disappointment in a long line of letdowns? Update 2. The next day, I found myself standing in front of my childhood home, feeling like a stranger. Mr. Thompson's car was already in the driveway, and to my surprise, so was Michael's. Taking a deep breath, I walked inside. The familiar creak of the front door sent a pang through my heart. Mr. Thompson was sitting at the dining room table, a stack of papers in front of him. Michael and Emma were there too, looking impatient. The lawyer gestured for me to sit down, his expression unreadable. I took a seat, acutely aware of the tension in the room. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady and professional. "I know this is a difficult time, but there are some important matters we need to discuss regarding Richard's will." Michael leaned forward, a smug smile on his face. "Let's get this over with. I've got plans for this place, and I'd like to get started as soon as possible." Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Actually, that's what we need to discuss. According to Richard's will, the house, and in fact all of his assets, have been left to Jake." For a moment, the room was silent. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Had I heard him correctly? After all these years of feeling like I was never good enough, Richard had left everything to me? Michael was the first to react. What? He exploded, jumping to his feet so quickly his chair fell backwards. That's impossible. I'm his son, his real son. He wouldn't leave everything to Jake. Mr. Thompson remained calm in the face of Michael's anger. I'm afraid it's quite clear. Richards will explicitly states that all of his assets, including the house, his savings, and his personal belongings, are to go to Jake. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It didn't make sense. All those years of criticism, a feeling like I could never measure up, and now this? Michael was pacing now, his face red with anger. This is ridiculous. He must have been out of his mind when he wrote this. I'll challenge it. I'll take this to court. Mr. Thompson shook his head. I wouldn't advise that. Richard was very thorough in preparing this will. He had it witnessed and notarized, and he even included a letter explaining his decision. Michael turned to me, his eyes blazing with fury. You did this, didn't you? You manipulated him somehow, turned him against me. I held up my hands, still in shock myself. I had no idea about any of this. I thought he was leaving everything to you. Mr. Thompson intervened before things could escalate further. If I may, I think Richard's letter might shed some light on his decision. He pulled out an envelope and began to read. To my sons, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I know my decision may come as a surprise to both of you, but I hope I can explain. Throughout my life, I've made many mistakes. One of my biggest was not showing my love equally to both of my sons. I was too hard on Jake, expecting too much, never showing enough affection. And I was too lenient with Michael, never setting proper boundaries or teaching important lessons. In my final years, as I reflected on my life, I realized something important. A real son isn't determined by blood, but by actions. And in that regard, it was Jake who acted as a true son should. He was there through the hard times, caring for me even when I didn't deserve it. He showed patience, kindness, and responsibility. All the things I tried to teach but failed to demonstrate myself. So I'm leaving everything to him, not as a punishment to Michael, but as a recognition of the son who truly lived up to the values I held dear. I hope you can both find it in your hearts to understand and forgive an old man's mistakes. As Mr. Thompson finished reading, the room fell silent again. I felt tears in my eyes, a lifetime of emotions welling up inside me. All those years I thought Richard didn't care, that he saw me as a disappointment, but he had been watching, noticing, appreciating in his own way. Michael stood frozen for a moment, his face a mask of shock and anger. Then, without a word, he grabbed Emma's hand and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I heard his car start up and speed out of the driveway, the screech of tires a final act of defiance. Mr. Thompson turned to me, a kind smile on his face. I know this is a lot to take in, Jake. Richard was very clear about his wishes. He wanted you to have a secure future, free from financial worries. I nodded, still unable to fully process what had happened. Thank you, I managed to say. I need some time to think about all this. As Mr. Thompson packed up his papers, he paused. There's one more thing. Your stepfather also left a personal letter for you. He asked that you read it in private. He handed me an envelope, my name written on it in Richard's familiar handwriting. With shaking hands, I took it, knowing that inside were words I'd waited a lifetime to hear. After Mr. Thompson left, I sat alone in the quiet house, turning the envelope over in my hands. Finally, I gathered the courage to open it and read. Dear Jake, I know I've never been good at expressing my feelings, but I hope this letter can make up for some of my shortcomings. I'm proud of the man you've become, despite my failures as a father. I had a difficult childhood myself, and I never learned how to show affection properly. I thought being strict and pushing you hard was the way to prepare you for life. I see now that I was wrong, and I regret the pain I caused you. Your kindness and dedication, especially in these last few years, have shown me what true strength and character look like. You've become the man I always hoped you would be, and more. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you these things while I was alive. I hope this letter and my final wishes can give you some peace and security. Take care of yourself, son. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Love, Richard. As I finished reading, tears streamed down my face. All those years of feeling inadequate, of thinking Richard didn't care, and now this. It was overwhelming. In the days that followed, I struggled to come to terms with everything. The house, once a source of tension and unhappy memories, now felt different. It was mine not just legally but in a deeper sense. It was a testament to Richard's love, expressed too late, but genuine nonetheless. Michael hasn't reached out since he left that day. I'm not sure if he will. Part of me hopes we can reconcile someday, but I know it might take time. The wound is still fresh, and the gap between us seems wider than ever. I've spent a lot of time thinking about family, about the complexities of love, and the different ways people express it. Richard's love was imperfect, often harsh, but it was real. In his own way, he was trying to prepare me for life, to make me strong. I wish he could have found a gentler way, but I understand him better now. As for the inheritance, it's more than just money and property. It's a responsibility. Richard trusted me to carry on his legacy, to embody the values he held dear. It's a daunting task, but one I'm determined to live up to. I've decided to use part of the inheritance to set up a scholarship fund in Richard's name. It's for kids from tough backgrounds, to help them get the education and opportunities they might otherwise miss. It feels like the right way to honor his memory, to take the lessons he taught me and pay them forward. As I sit here now, in the house that's suddenly mine, I'm still trying to make sense of everything. The relationship between fathers and sons is complicated, often fraught with misunderstandings and unspoken emotions. Richard and I never had the relationship I wanted when he was alive, but his final act has given me a chance to understand him better, to see the love that was always there, hidden beneath the surface. I wish he could have told me these things while he was alive. We could have had conversations, cleared the air, maybe even built the relationship I always longed for. But life doesn't always give us neat endings or perfect closure. For now, I'm focusing on honoring Richard's memory by living the values he tried to instill in me. Work hard, be responsible, and most importantly, show love to those who matter. It's a legacy I'm proud to carry forward. As I look to the future, I feel a mix of emotions. Sadness for what was lost, gratitude for what I've gained, and hope for what's to come. Richard's unexpected legacy has given me not just financial security, but a new understanding of family, love, and forgiveness. It's a new chapter in my life, one I never expected, but I'm ready to face it, carrying with me the lessons of the past and the hope for a brighter future. In the end, that might be the greatest inheritance of all. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. Brother made my life hell. Later, I found out he got my wife pregnant, and our son wasn't mine. Now he's crawling back after our parents disowned him and left me their $2 million inheritance. I have a younger brother, Caleb, who has absolutely despised me all my life. If you are wondering if it was out of jealousy, well, you were wrong. I wasn't the favored child. He was, so he had nothing to feel jealous about. Let me give you some context. My mom has always pampered my younger brother. He was the golden child in our family. Mom would make his meals, do his laundry, and even ask me to assist with his schoolwork. I was expected to help out just because he's family, but the same courtesy was never extended to me. I came to accept it as I was quite independent. Perhaps it was partly my fault for accommodating his wants and needs without reciprocation. He never lent a hand when I needed it and reached out to me only when he wanted something from me. I was a quiet, introverted kid who liked to study and keep to myself, while he was exactly like our dad, rough and loud. I also tend to be straightforward and honest, not sugarcoating things and saying it like it is. I believe my mother might have developed some negative perception of me as a result of my childhood. As a result, he was everyone's favorite in our family. I didn't mind that when we were growing up. The trouble arose when he found a way to sort of bully me or mock me for being different from him. He would mock me for my height or the fact that I was wearing glasses. He would sneak into my room and try to read my diary so then he could complain to my mom about anything that I had written. I would yell at him and complain to my parents about him invading my privacy, but they would laugh it off, telling me how it was not a big deal. He did more terrible things, like nearly breaking my glasses and putting nasty things in my food. He had even once put little stones in my cereal, but luckily I found them before it could have hurt my teeth. I told my mom, but she brushed it off, saying, "This is how brothers bond." Every time we would fight, Caleb would insult me, knowingly focusing on all my insecurities. He and I went to the same school, so he was aware that I was being bullied by a couple of kids. He would show support to those kids instead of supporting me. He would join them in calling me names like the ugly loser or hairy monkey and encouraging the bullies to physically harm me because, according to him, I was just a big failure. Another time, we had a fight about something I can't remember, but it was probably something silly, and at the end of the fight, he told me to kill myself. Other insults I could brush off easily, but that one really hurt because I was struggling with my mental health during that time. I'm doing better now. It just sucked to hear that my own brother wanted me to die. Since Dad was often at work and Mom didn't seem to care much, she even scolded me once, claiming it was my fault for playing and irritating him. Things got progressively worse. There was a time he attempted to burn my hair when we were in high school, and shockingly, Mom sided with him, insisting he was just playing. Who plays like that? Serious L. Fortunately, Dad eventually took my side and pointed out that they had some serious issues. He threatened to call the police on Caleb. This was an eye-opening moment for my brother because, until then, he had never been reprimanded for any of his actions. He was really taken aback, and my dad continued to tell him how enough was enough and that he needed to start respecting his older brother. Later, Dad came into my room and talked to me. I had never expected my dad to support me because he always told Caleb while he was growing up how similar both of them were, which was true. Dad told me that he had patiently waited for years for Caleb to grow up, thinking maybe he was just being an immature kid, but he was slowly starting to realize that Caleb was becoming a big bully. When I heard my dad say this, I felt so validated that I almost broke down in tears. I confessed to my dad everything that Caleb had done to me over the years and even opened up about the bullying in school. My dad was shocked that I was going through so much. The next day, he went and talked to the principal so my bullies could be warned about severe consequences if they continued. Later in the evening, my dad enrolled me in MMA at our local gym. He told me that I needed to man up and stand up to bullies in my life. I will admit that a nerdy kid like me trying to learn to fight must have been laughable to watch. However, like everything in my life, I am very focused when I want to learn something. I carved out time for my studies so I could work out every day and go to MMA classes. Not to brag, but it completely changed my life and my physique. One day, Caleb was at it again. He had stolen my pocket money, which we used to get if we helped our parents with doing chores. I had been saving my money for quite some time. Caleb had sneaked into my room and taken my money. I caught him when he was about to cycle off with his friends. I firmly told him to give me back my money since he knew stealing was wrong. But Caleb snickered and taunted that all I could do was run to Daddy for help. I don't know what came over me, but I gave Caleb a resounding punch to his face. He was stunned in silence as he fell backward on the ground. I picked him up and took out my money from his trouser pocket and then threw him back down on the ground. Caleb started to cry loudly like a little baby. It was comical to see a teenage boy crying on the ground. However, my mother came running out the door, hearing her baby boy, to help him up and find out what had happened. When she learned that I had fought with him, she was surprised and then started to reprimand me. She told me that, as an older brother, I should teach better things to Caleb, while Caleb seemed to be enjoying seeing me being chastised. My mother also complained to my dad about how I had thrashed Caleb up and how I needed to be controlled. My dad grimly asked both of us to explain ourselves. I told him how Caleb had stolen the money that I had worked hard for and saved up, while Caleb attempted to justify how he needed the money for a date and that, as my brother, I should help him. However, Dad told Caleb that he was lucky that I just punched him for stealing my money because anyone else would have called the police on him. My dad continued to tell Caleb how he had no right to take others' things without their consent. Caleb didn't like that and started to throw a tantrum, probably wanting our mother to side with him, but Dad remained firm. When Caleb realized that I was not going to be punished for punching him, he screamed how much he hated me and then ran back into his room and locked himself in. Since that incident, Caleb maintained his distance from me. He had finally realized that he could not bully me anymore, and even Dad was not supporting his antics. For the first time in a long time, I felt we were equals. Even though he could not physically hurt me, he would try to verbally say nasty things to me when he knew our parents would not be around. It definitely got worse as he got older. It felt like each year he became angrier and had a shorter fuse. If I approached him to ask something, he would simply ignore me to my face and walk away out of the room, calling me a nerd or a loser under his breath. If he wanted to say something to me, he would only go through our mother, who would relay the message. I would question my mother as to why Caleb could not just talk to me if he wanted something, and she would implore me to be more understanding. I had no clue if this was just him going through puberty and I had to wait it out, or if he actually truly hated me. I used to be able to deal with the things he would say over the years, but it got to a point where I just wanted to move out of home to get away from him. I would go to my mother countless times asking if she could mediate a sit-down conversation for all of us to talk it out, but she always refused, saying she didn't want to get involved. I even asked for her opinion on why he treated me that way, but she would just brush off the question. Eventually, I went away to my dream university. Since I was a grade A student and was even qualified for a scholarship, my dad threw a party for me, and my mom seemed proud of me also. However, Caleb remained aloof and distant, barely acknowledging my achievements. The day I left for university was a mix of excitement for the future and relief to escape the toxic environment at home. The first few months at the university were liberating. I made new friends, enjoyed my classes, and started to build a life separate from the oppressive atmosphere I had experienced growing up. The constant fear of Caleb's verbal attacks lifted, and I felt a newfound sense of peace. I began dating my wife, Karen, when we were both in the second year of our university. My friend introduced us at a frat party, and we clicked right away. Coming from a religious family, having kids without being married was a big no-no. However, we found out she was pregnant when we were in the last year of our university, which prompted us to get married as soon as we graduated. Our wedding was a small but peaceful ceremony. Our parents were happy for us, and we had a good time at our wedding. At that moment, I believe she was the love of my life. I always held the mindset that I wanted monogamy in life, one woman to come home to and be with for the long haul. Despite women trying to engage with me over the years, I never pursued anything because I was genuinely content in my marriage. Karen was my dream girl, and I never wanted to hurt her. However, over the years, there were two occasions when I discovered she was being unfaithful in our marriage. One was an on-and-off affair that lasted a few years with her married coworker, and the other was a fling with an ex she had dated in high school when she went to visit her family states away. I'm sure there will be people who might call me foolish, and looking back, I can't really deny it myself. After a period of separation in both situations, I made the decision to forgive my wife. I never wanted to raise my child in a broken home, and I genuinely believed we could overcome these challenges. We were quite young when the situation with her coworker occurred, so I chalked it up to youthful mistakes and not thinking things through. For a while, things seemed okay with us. I could never fully trust her, but I tried my best to push aside my doubts because I knew that if I chose to forgive her, I had to work towards moving past it and starting with a clean slate. It's been 4 years since the second time she was unfaithful, and I felt like I made the right decision by giving her a chance to show that she still wanted to be in our marriage. For years, Karen seemed to have changed, and we were genuinely happy with plans set in motion for the future of our family. However, 3 months ago, my reality was once again shattered by yet another incident, which, in my mind, was far worse than the others, when she revealed that she had been sleeping with someone for quite some time and suggested that our son might not even be mine. Hearing her words, I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. A mix of shock, betrayal, and disbelief overwhelmed me. I struggled to comprehend the enormity of what she had just disclosed. In a daze, I managed to ask her why she had kept such a significant secret and how she could have done something so devastating. Her reaction was a cold and indifferent demeanor. She seemed detached, almost unbothered by the pain she had inflicted. Her responses were vague, leaving me with more questions than answers. It was a surreal and painful moment, confronting the shattered trust and the uncertainties about my own family. I continued to ask Karen to tell me the truth because I felt like I deserved to know the father of the child since I had been literally raising our son since the beginning. In the end, She admitted that it was Caleb. My eyes widened in shock as I asked her what exactly she meant by that. This is when Karen told me how she and Caleb had become friends back when I had introduced Karen to my family, and she had stayed with us for Thanksgiving up until the New Year's. I remember Caleb, who was usually cold to me, was quite polite and warm towards her. I was glad since I did not want to make Karen feel unwelcome. She wanted to be accepted into my family, so she would spend significant time hanging out with my mom whenever she could. She noticed that Caleb and I were not that close and questioned me about it. I finally opened up to her about my childhood equation with Caleb and told her how we might never be able to repair our relationship since he never could move past his feelings. Karen understood. However, she started to include Caleb whenever we would go out, perhaps hoping that both of us would warm up to each other. If we were going to watch a movie, she would invite Caleb, and then we would have to watch whatever movie Caleb wanted to watch. I guess during this time, Caleb and I did talk a few words here and there, which was a significant improvement compared to how he had been giving me the silent treatment for years. I do remember Karen and Caleb would hang out and play video games together, but I never thought much about it. Karen told me how one day Caleb opened up to her about his struggles and his recent breakup with his then ex-girlfriend. He seemed so vulnerable with her, and they struck a friendship. She said how he would sometimes harmlessly flirt with her when I was not around, and apparently one thing led to another, and she could not control herself anymore. I closed my eyes as the vision of my wife and brother sleeping together almost made me puke. She told me how guilty she felt after that and ran away from him after that. She decided to go back home, which was true because my girlfriend had abruptly told me how she wanted to go back home when I thought she would be spending the New Year's with me. I tried to convince her to stay, but she was adamant that she had to go after the holidays. When we met in college once our classes resumed, she was back to her usual cheerful self, so I never questioned anything. 2 weeks after that, we found out that she was pregnant. Now Karen told me that she had no idea whether it was really my child or Caleb's, and she had no way to find proof because I was already stepping up. She knew out of the two I was a more dependable brother, so she decided to stay with me, and this is why we got married. I felt like my whole world was crashing down around me. The son I had loved and spent countless hours with may not even be mine. I questioned her if she had been sleeping with Caleb in the present times, and she nodded slowly. Karen told me how she and Caleb had always stayed in touch because their chemistry was undeniable. They would sneak off to hotels when she would lie to me that she was working overtime. She told me how half of her business trips were just romantic getaways with him. I asked Karen why she would even be married to me if she really wanted my brother, but Karen told me how she did not want to be the one to break off a marriage, and seeing how I was such a wonderful father to our son, she had stayed with me all this while. In her words, she had made a mistake, and she didn't know when to stop. I simply told Karen that I was glad that she told me the truth and that I was going to pack up and move out. Karen started to cry and ask for my forgiveness, telling me how I was supposed to scream and yell at her, but here I was calmly thinking of my next move. I remained quiet while I walked to my cupboard and started packing some of my clothes into my suitcase. Karen kept saying how if I really loved her then I should try to at least fight for her, and mistakes happen in every marriage. When she realized that I was not going to do anything, she changed her tactic and told me how my son would be affected if we got a divorce and how children should not be brought up in a broken home. I reminded her how I may not even be the father, which then reduced her to tears, and she started to yell at me about being cruel and how I could easily walk away when I had been there for the child since his birth. It seemed like my wife believed there was nothing that could make me want out of our marriage. I guess it was partly my fault for letting a lot slide in the past. While I did have some love for her, it felt more like it stemmed from the fact that I thought we had a son together and had been together since college. Karen continued to claim that it was not too late and that we could work things out, but I struggled to believe it and felt like I had no more patience to deal with her. Trust was a major issue for me, and her words felt empty. Even if I forgave her, I could never forget that she had slept with my own brother. I have always believed that people could make mistakes and be forgiven because we're all flawed, but this went beyond a certain limit. I left her crying on the doorsteps and checked into a hotel. The next day, I went straight to my parents and told them everything about my wife's affair with Caleb and how they had been sleeping together for years behind our backs. The shock on their faces was evident. My mother, true to her nature, initially tried to defend Caleb, telling me that this could not be true since her boy could never do something like this to his own brother. Determined to expose the truth, I requested my parents to remain silent and allow me to call Caleb right in front of them. I told them to not make a sound since this is how I could expose Caleb's true colors. I wanted him to think that it was just a private conversation between us so that he could hopefully let his guard down. As Caleb picked up, I laid it on him and confronted him with the revelation of his affair with my wife. Initially, he denied it vehemently and refused to accept it. Then, when I told him that Karen had admitted to everything, he started to blame Karen, labeling her as characterless. He told me that it was not his fault if women were attracted to him and that he was the better-looking brother. I told him firmly that I was going to expose him in front of everyone. When Caleb mocked that no one would believe me and that he was the golden child anyway, I scoffed at his arrogance and thanked him for confirming the truth since our parents had heard everything. Caleb went quiet and then spluttered to explain himself, stumbling over his words in an attempt to salvage his image. My mother, still grappling with shock, demanded an explanation from Caleb. He stuttered through a feeble attempt to justify his actions, blaming everyone else but himself and desperately trying to shift the blame onto Karen. I could see my mother, who was once protective of her favored son, now felt a mix of disappointment and anger. In that charged moment, I felt a strange sense of vindication. For years I had endured Caleb's torment. Now the truth had come to light, and the roles were reversed. It was Caleb who stood exposed, his actions laid bare for everyone to see. As Caleb's words faltered, my father, usually reserved in his expressions, couldn't contain his disappointment. He asked me to pass him the phone and went off on Caleb. He began, his tone heavy with disapproval. What you've done is not just a betrayal of your brother, but a betrayal of this family. You slept with your brother's wife and continued to sleep with her even after they got married. Your actions have consequences, and they have irreversibly damaged the trust we had in you. I raised both of you to value family, loyalty, and decency. What you've shown today goes against everything I've tried to instill in you. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle on Caleb's conscience. The disregard for your brother's feelings, the lack of respect for the sanctity of his marriage, it's unacceptable. You've not only hurt him but tarnished the bonds that hold us together as a family. I feel like me and your mom are to be blamed for what you have become now, and we will no longer let you get away with this behavior anymore. Starting today, I am cutting you off from the college funds that I set up for you. You can figure it out on your own about your university fees. I will also not be funding your lifestyle anymore. You think it makes you more of a man to sleep with married women? Well, now let's see what happens to you when you don't have my money to depend on. I, on the other hand, maintained a composed demeanor throughout all this. Although I initially wanted to scream at Caleb, watching my dad punish him was the ultimate vindication. I had exposed his true nature, and it was clear that he had underestimated the consequences. My mother, Caleb persistent in his protests, continued to justify himself, but my father swiftly ended the call, shutting down Caleb's attempts to explain away his actions. My mom came up to me and hugged me. It had been a while since we shared such a moment, but in that embrace, there was unspoken understanding and support amid the family turmoil. She apologized to me that she had not believed me all this time. I felt like my 14-year-old self would never have imagined this moment, being vindicated and embraced by my mother. After that, my dad helped me find a good lawyer so I could divorce Karen. She and her lawyer tried to fight dirty by asking me for alimony since I earned more than her, but luckily her affair played heavily in my favor. We also had a paternity test for my son, and it was determined that Caleb was indeed the father of the child. I can't begin to write how painful it was for me to digest this news. It was worse than when Karen told me that she had been cheating on me. I felt so pissed that my son didn't belong to me. However, I guess God works in mysterious ways because I decided to stay strong throughout all this. Karen begged me that I should keep visiting my son since he should not be punished for all this. But I just could not bear to see him. He reminded me of Caleb, and I hated it. After my divorce was finalized and I was finally free, I moved into my own bachelor pad. It felt surreal living on my own since I had gotten married so young and never really lived on my own. However, since I had always been independent, I was quick to adapt to my bachelor lifestyle and I honestly loved it. 2 weeks ago, my dad called me to let me know that he had been thinking of changing his will since he didn't want to give Caleb anything. If there's one thing to know about my dad, it is that he is extremely stubborn. Since he had made up his mind that he wanted nothing to do with Caleb, he had kept his word. Caleb tried to reach out to our parents and even showed up at their doorstep begging them for forgiveness, but he was not even allowed inside. My mother, who usually caves into Caleb's tantrums, also seems to be done with him, although it must be hurting her the most throughout all this. Caleb didn't even once send me a text to apologize for what he had done, so clearly he didn't even regret it. He was just sad about being cut off from our parents. Well, Dad told me that he would be leaving everything behind to me just to ensure that Caleb doesn't protest later. He would be leaving him with only $1. My eyes widened in shock as my dad had worked really hard his whole life, including his assets, retirement fund, and life insurance. It would come up to almost $2 million. The only clause in his will was that if my dad passed away before my mom, she would continue to live in their house, even though the ownership would go to my name. Of course, I didn't mind this since I would want to take care of my mom until her last days. I don't know how, but Caleb found out about all this, and since he can't reach my parents, he called me yesterday trying to mend things right between us. He told me how he had been having trouble keeping up with college, and that after Karen had found out about the paternity of the child, she had been pestering him about child support. He told me that he had no money and was looking for part-time jobs, yet could not find anything. He begged me to talk to our family so we could start fresh since he really needed my help. I started to laugh at his face and told him that I was so done with him and that he should have thought about all this before sleeping with my wife and getting her pregnant. Caleb started to argue that I was being unfair and that she was to blame also, to which I agreed and reminded him how I did divorce her and now she was his responsibility, so he should not be calling me complaining about her or her child since this was the consequences of his own actions. Caleb started to raise his voice, but I cut him off and reminded him that he was no longer the favored child in the family, but the black sheep who slept with his own brother's wife. Caleb started to cry at this point and told me how everyone had been on him, including our grandparents and relatives, which was true, but this was no longer my concern. I told him that we were done and to never call me again since I was no longer his brother. Since then, I've been replaying the conversation over and over in my head. Although I hate my brother, I had never heard him cry, at least not since we grew up. I won't lie, but it did hurt me a bit that he was this helpless. So I guess I'm here to ask if I should talk to our parents about him or would I be in a hole if I don't. Update 1. Hi everyone. A lot of you have been asking me as to why I am no longer in contact with my son, Henry, and some of you have also called me cruel. Well, I am sorry to say this, but I don't feel comfortable raising another man's child. This is not a stepson scenario. In this case, I was led to believe that he was my son, and then I discovered that he was, in fact, my brother's son. Of course, I am hurt, and I have cried over it for days. But then the reason I don't want any contact with Henry is because I no longer want Karen in my life. If I talk to her child, she will find a way to snake her way into my life again, and I need my own space. You can call me cruel or selfish, but I can't see him ever again, or at least until a very long time. Update 2. Most of you have correctly guessed that it was, in fact, my mother who told Caleb about my dad changing his will, and he called me as a last resort to mend things. I did confront her in front of my dad, and she broke down. She told me how I had punished Caleb enough and that he had learned his lesson. My dad firmly told my mother that if she felt what Caleb did was forgivable, then he could no longer stay married to her since he could never forgive him for this betrayal. His threat seemed to shut my mother up. My dad made it clear to her that if she ever talked with Caleb and we found out, then she could pack her bags and just leave. Like I said, my dad is a very stubborn guy. Hopefully, my mother will learn from her mistakes. Update 3. It's been 5 months since my last update. My relationship with my parents has improved in the last couple of months. My dad and I go golfing every weekend, and he behaves with me more like a buddy than my own father. My mother, even though she misses Caleb, has stayed away from him. The last I heard about Caleb was from my cousin who told me how Caleb had been asking everyone for money and, In the end, had to drop out of college when he could not afford to pay his fees anymore. He and Karen are living together, and he even has a job as a part-time mechanic. Apparently, I think they are raising Henry together, which is a good thing, I guess. I never bring up Caleb in my discussions with my parents, and neither do they. For everyone asking, I am doing quite well. I was promoted at my job 2 months ago, so my salary has improved significantly. I haven't been dating anyone since I feel like I still need time and space to heal. I've been going for a few therapy classes, so I guess we will see how that works out. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Fiancé takes me to buy a diamond ring for my engagement, but we bump into a woman who calls him a cheat. I was the one who called her there. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and I've been living with my fiancé, Owen, 29M, in a nice apartment that my father gifted me when I turned 21. I've been in this place since before I met Owen, and it's been our home for the past couple of years. I thought everything was perfect, but now I'm not so sure. Let me give you some background on our relationship and what's happened recently. After graduating college with a degree in marketing, I immediately started working at a mid-sized advertise firm. I've always been pretty smart and driven, so I quickly landed a good position as a junior account manager. Most days I drove to work in my reliable old Honda Civic, but sometimes I'd grab a shared cab to save on parking and do my part for the environment. That's actually how I met Owen. It was about 3 years ago, in the middle of a hectic week at work. I was running late for an important client meeting because my car wouldn't start. In a panic, I called for a shared ride. When the car arrived, there was already another passenger inside, Owen. He had this friendly smile and offered to move over so I could have more room. We didn't talk much during the ride because I was frantically reviewing my presentation notes, but I remember thinking how thoughtful he was. In my rush to get out of the car when we arrived downtown, I accidentally left my purse behind. I didn't even realize it until I reached for my wallet to buy a coffee after my meeting. I was freaking out. Not only were all my cards in there, but also a significant amount of cash I was supposed to deposit at the bank for my mom's small business later that afternoon. I got a call from an unknown number. It was Owen saying he'd found my purse in the shared ride and wanted to return it. I was so relieved. I could have cried. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near my office after work. When I saw Owen walk in with my purse, I felt this wave of gratitude. He could have easily kept the money. It was nearly $2,000 in cash, but he didn't. We ended up talking for hours over coffee. He was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. Before we left, we exchanged numbers, just in case. After that, Owen and I kept bumping into each other in the weirdest places. There was the time I ran into him at the farmer's market while buying my weekly supply of avocados. Then I saw him at my favorite bookstore browsing the same obscure poetry section I love. We even ended up at the same indie film screening at a local theater. Each time it felt like such a delightful coincidence. Owen joked that it must be destiny, and I'll admit it did feel a bit magical. We started hanging out as friends, grabbing lunch at quirky food trucks or checking out local art exhibitions together. I found myself looking forward to our encounters, wondering when I'd run into him next. Over time, our friendship grew into something more. I found myself sharing things with Owen that I'd never told anyone else. My dreams, my fears, my silly childhood stories. He was always there to listen, to offer advice, or just to make me laugh when I needed it. On my 26th birthday, Owen surprised me with this incredibly romantic gesture. He texted me in the morning asking me to meet him at the park where we'd had our first real conversation after the purse incident. When I arrived, I couldn't believe my eyes. He had set up a picnic with all my favorite foods, from the spicy tuna rolls I crave to the chocolate truffles I can never resist. There were fairy lights strung in the trees, softly twinkling as the sun began to set. As we sat there enjoying the food and the beautiful evening, Owen pulled out a small velvet box. My heart started racing, thinking it might be a ring, but instead, inside was a delicate silver bracelet. It had a small charm that said, "Destiny," a callback to his joke about our continual run-ins. Owen took my hand and told me he'd fallen in love with me. He said that from the moment he saw me rushing into that shared ride, he knew there was something special about me. He asked if I'd be his girlfriend, to make our unexpected encounters a permanent fixture in both our lives. It was so sweet and thoughtful. I said yes without hesitation. The next month, Owen moved into my apartment with me. Felt like such a natural progression. We fell into a comfortable routine, making dinner together, binge-watching our favorite shows, and turning my space into our home. I introduced Owen to my family shortly after he moved in. I was a bit nervous because my family can be pretty protective, especially my dad. They were a bit cautious at first, asking Owen all sorts of questions about his job, his family, and his intentions with me. But Owen handled it all with grace and charm. He won them over with his wit and his obvious affection for me. My mom especially loved him. She was always saying what a catch he was and how lucky I was to have found such a wonderful man. Things have been great between us. Owen proposed a few months ago with a beautiful speech about how I changed his life and how he wanted to spend the rest of it making me as happy as I'd made him. We've been planning our engagement party, set for next month. My parents are thrilled. I feel a little sad for Owen because he has no family and is an orphan, but I always tell him that we are his family now. Yesterday, we went to look at diamond rings. I was so excited to pick out something special, a symbol of our love and commitment. We went to this fancy jewelry store downtown, the kind with plush carpets and champagne for customers. We were looking at different styles, and I had just tried on this gorgeous solitaire that caught the light beautifully. I was admiring how it looked on my hand when a young woman walked into the store. She looked about our age, maybe 29 or so, with long dark hair and a designer handbag. As soon as she saw Owen, her face went white. Then she started yelling. She called Owen David and said he was a liar and a cheat. She told me to be careful that he cons rich young women. According to her, he expresses his love, makes them believe all sorts of things, then disappears without a trace, leaving them heartbroken and often in financial ruin. I was shocked. I tried to explain that she must have Owen confused with someone else, but she insisted she was certain it was him. She said she'd never forget the face of the man who ruined her life. Owen looked really upset. He denied everything, saying he had no idea who this woman was or why she was saying these things. The woman, who called herself Bella, started to cause a scene. She was crying and yelling, telling me not to make the same mistake she did. Owen grabbed my hand and practically dragged me out of the store, saying we needed to leave before things got worse. On the drive home, I kept asking Owen what that was all about, if it was just a misunderstanding, why we didn't stay and sort it out. But he kept giving vague answers, saying the woman was clearly unstable and he didn't want to make a scene in the store. He said she must have confused him with someone else and that these things happen sometimes. When we got home, Owen went straight to bed, saying he had a headache from all the stress. I'm sitting here now, completely confused and unsure of what to think. Owen has always been so kind and honest. He's been a constant in my life for years. Could that woman be telling the truth? But if she was, why would Owen have stuck around for so long? I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to believe Owen, to trust in the relationship we've built. But another part keeps replaying that woman's words in my head. She seemed so sure, so hurt, and Owen's reaction was off. He's never shied away from confrontation before. In fact, he's always been the type to face problems head-on. I'm torn between my trust in Owen and this nagging doubt that's crept in. Should I confront Owen again? Try to find that woman and get more information? Or am I overthinking this whole thing? Has anyone else ever experienced something like this? Any advice would be appreciated, that I feel like I'm going crazy, doubting the man I thought I knew so well. Date 1. It's been a week since the incident at the jewelry store, and I feel like I'm living in a completely different reality. Everything has changed, and I'm still trying to process it all. I promised to update you, so here goes. Owen's behavior has changed dramatically since that day. He's become incredibly paranoid, constantly checking up on me and tracking what I'm doing. He calls me multiple times a day when I'm at work, which he's never done before. At first, I thought he was just being attentive, maybe worried about me after the shock at the jewelry store. But it's beyond that now. He wants to know where I am, who I'm with, what I'm doing at all times. When he's not hovering over me, he's barely home. He leaves early in the morning and comes back late at night. When I ask where he's been, he just says he's busy with work and engagement-related stuff, but something doesn't add up. He's always been open about his work before, often sharing funny stories about his coworkers or venting about difficult projects. Now he's vague and dismissive when I ask about his day. I've noticed other changes too. He's become jumpy, frightened at small noises. He's constantly checking his phone, but he angles the screen away from me when he does. Once I came home early from work and found him hurriedly closing his laptop, looking guilty. When I asked what he was doing, he mumbled something about surprise engagement party plans. But here's the thing. I haven't been entirely honest with you all either. The scene at the jewelry store, that was staged. I set the whole thing up. I know, it sounds crazy. Let me explain. About 2 weeks before the jewelry store incident, I had to go to Boston for a work meeting. It was a quick trip. Fly in the morning, meeting in the afternoon, fly back the next day. After the meeting, I decided to do some shopping since I rarely get to visit Boston. I had also picked up a custom-made picture frame with a photo of Owen that I'd ordered as a surprise anniversary gift. As I was walking down Newbury Street, juggling my shopping bags and admiring the beautiful brownstones, I accidentally bumped into a woman. Owen's photo frame fell out of the bag and hit the ground. I apologized profusely, but as I bent to pick up the frame, I noticed the woman staring at it intensely. She introduced herself as Bella and asked me how I knew the man in the photo. Confused, I explained that he was my fiancé, Owen. Her face fell, and she asked if we could sit down somewhere to talk. Something in her expression made me agree, despite my initial hesitation. We found a nearby cafe and sat down with our coffees. Bella took a deep breath and told me a story that made my blood run cold. She had met a man she knew as David 3 years ago, in almost the exact same way I had met Owen. The shared ride, the forgotten purse, the coincidental meetings, it was all the same. He had charmed her, made her fall in love with him, and then, over time, he had started asking for money. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. By the time she realized what was happening, he had drained her savings account and disappeared. I didn't want to believe her at first. I told her about how Owen had been with me for 3 years, how he'd met my family, how we were planning our engagement party. But as we talked more, the similarities in our stories became impossible to ignore. Bella showed me old pictures of her and David on her phone. It was undeniably Owen. We spent hours talking that day. Bella told me about other women she'd found who had similar stories about Owen/David. It was a pattern. He would target women who seemed financially stable, spend a few years gaining their trust and access to their money, and then vanish. Sometimes he'd leave them in debt, having convinced them to take out loans or credit cards in their names. I felt sick, angry, betrayed, but mostly I felt stupid. How could I have fallen for this? How could I have been so blind? I always prided myself on being smart and independent, but I'd been completely fooled. Bella and I hatched a plan. We decided to confront Owen publicly, to catch him off guard. That's why I suggested going ring shopping. Bella agreed to come to the store and pretend she was just recognizing him for the first time. I thought seeing his reaction would give me the confirmation I needed, and it did. His panic, his rush to get out of there, his vague excuses afterward. It all fits with what Bella told me. Since then, I've been pretending everything is normal while gathering more evidence. I've gone through our financial records and found some discrepancies. Small amounts missing here and there, adding up to quite a bit over time. I've also been in touch with some of the other women Bella told me about, and their stories match up perfectly. I know now that the man I thought I knew, the man I thought I loved, doesn't exist. Owen or David or whatever his real name is a con artist, and I'm his latest mark. The past week has been the hardest of my life. Every moment I spend with Owen feels like a lie. Every time he touches me or tells me he loves me, I have to fight the urge to scream or cry. I've been making excuses to sleep on the couch, saying I've been having trouble sleeping and don't want to disturb him. In reality, I can't bear to be close to him. I've been in constant contact with Bella and the other victims. We've been sharing information, building a case against Owen/David. I've also reached out to a lawyer friend for advice on how to proceed legally. The hardest part has been keeping this from my family. They're so excited about the engagement party, constantly calling with ideas and plans. My mom keeps sending me links to wedding dresses. It breaks my heart to know how devastated they'll be when they find out the truth. I've made up my mind. Tomorrow I'm going to expose him. I've already contacted my family and some close friends. They were shocked, but they believe me and they're going to help. I've also reached out to the police with the evidence I've gathered. I'm terrified of confronting Owen. What if he becomes violent? What if he manages to talk his way out of it? But I'm also angry. I want justice, not just for me but for all the women he's hurt. I want to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. I've arranged for my brother and a few of his friends to be there when I confront Owen, just in case things get ugly. We're going to do it at my parents' house, under the guise of discussing engagement party details. I'm scared, but I'm also strangely calm. For the first time in weeks, I feel like I'm taking control of my life again. I'm done being a victim. Tomorrow I will become a survivor. Wish me luck. I'll update you all tomorrow after it's done. And thank you all of you for your support and advice throughout this nightmare. It meant more to me than you know. Update 2. It's done. Owen has been exposed and is now in police custody. I'm still shaking from the adrenaline, but I wanted to update you all on what happened this morning. I woke up early and pretended everything was normal. I made breakfast for Owen like I usually do on Saturdays, pancakes with fresh berries, his favorite. He seemed a bit on edge, probably still paranoid from the jewelry store incident, but he didn't suspect anything. I told him my parents wanted us to come over to discuss some engagement party details. He looked uncomfortable but agreed. We arrived at my parents' house around noon. My mom greeted us with a forced smile. I could tell it was killing her to act normal. My dad couldn't even look Owen in the eye. We all sat in the living room, the tension evident. That's when Bella walked in from the kitchen. Owen's face went pale. He started stammering, trying to make excuses, but I cut him off. I told him I knew everything, about his real identity, about the other women, about the money he'd been slowly siphoning from my accounts. As I spoke, more people started arriving. Other victims Bella had put me in touch with, my friends who were there for support, and finally, 2 police officers I had contacted earlier. Owen tried to run, but my brother and his friends blocked the door. The look on Owen's face when he realized he was cornered, I'll never forget it. It was like watching a mask slip away, revealing the stranger underneath. He tried to talk his way out of it, spinning some story about being framed, about how he loved me and would never hurt me, but his words fell flat. We had too much evidence, too many witnesses. The police officers read him his rights and placed him under arrest. As they were handcuffing him, Owen looked at me with this mixture of anger and something that almost looked like respect. He said, "I underestimated you." Those were the last words he said to me before they took him away. After Owen was gone, we all sat in my parents' living room, shell-shocked. Bella hugged me and thanked me for believing her. The other victims shared their stories, and we realized the full extent of Owen's cons. He'd been doing this for nearly a decade, moving from city to city, changing his name each time. The police took statements from everyone. They said that with all the evidence we've gathered, plus the testimony from multiple victims, Owen will likely be facing serious charges. They're also investigating to see if he has any accomplices, or if he's wanted for similar crimes in other states. My parents were devastated. My mom couldn't stop crying, saying she should have seen through him. My dad was angry, both at Owen and at himself for not protecting me better. I tried to reassure them that it wasn't their fault, that Owen had fooled everyone. I'm still processing everything. Part of me is relieved it's over, but another part is devastated. I spent 3 years of my life with this man. I thought I knew him. I thought we had a future together. Finding out it was all a lie, it's going to take a long time to come to terms with that. The next few days were a blur of police interviews, talks with lawyers, and tearful conversations with friends and family. I had to go through all of our joint accounts trying to trace where the money had gone. Turns out Owen had been slowly transferring funds to offshore accounts. The lawyers say we might be able to recover some of it, but not all. My family and friends have been incredibly supportive. They're helping me change the locks, close any accounts Owen had access to, and basically erase him from my life. Bella and some of the other victims have suggested starting a support group. I think I might take them up on that offer. The hardest part has been dealing with the emotional fallout. Some days I'm angry at Owen, at myself for being so gullible. Other days I'm just sad, mourning the relationship I thought I had. I've started seeing a therapist to help me work through it all. I know I have a long road ahead. There will be legal proceedings to deal with, and I'm still working on rebuilding my financial security. But I also feel stronger than I ever have. I faced my worst fear, that the person I loved wasn't who I thought they were, and I came out the other side. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, trust your instincts. If something feels off, investigate. Don't be afraid to ask questions or seek help. And remember, it's not your fault. Con artists like Owen are experts at manipulation. The shame is on them, not on us. Thank you all for your support throughout this crazy situation. Your comments and messages have meant more to me than you know. I'll update again if there are any major developments with the case, but for now, I'm going to focus on healing and moving forward. Here's to new beginnings and learning to trust again, starting with trusting myself. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My fiancé's late wife's sisters destroyed my new car, called me a grave-robbing whore, and threatened me for stealing him. So I made him choose between them or me. I, 25F, am getting married to my fiancé, 29M, in May. When we first got together, he told me that he was married from 20 to 22 years old to his high school sweetheart. We met when he was 25, but she passed away from sepsis due to a botched surgery. He didn't cope well and stayed in contact with her family, namely, her father and 2 sisters, 19 and 24. It was a soft spot for me for a while at the beginning because there was so much history they had that we would not have, and it was tough knowing that she was all around him. I never told him and decided to work through it on my own, especially with the fact that he would often spend time with her family during our relationship. Her birthday, their anniversary, and the anniversary of her death, he'd spend the day with her family. It was uncomfortable at first, knowing the man I loved was reminiscing about the love he had with someone else, but I kept trying to see it from his perspective. The last couple of years, I am completely secure in our relationship, and it doesn't bother me much anymore. Well, he proposed this time last year. I was over the moon. I love this man with all my heart. But I recently learned that he never told them that we got engaged. I've been trying local coffee shops the past few months rather than my usual run and tried a new one. His late wife's sister worked there, and other than being awkward, she did a double take of my engagement ring and looked really unhappy. I didn't mention it and left. My fiancée told me that she kept messaging him on social media about it, and I wasn't happy that he kept it a secret. He apologized and was very depleted by it all. He said that he didn't want to hide me, but he didn't want to hurt them either, and that both of us were a huge part of his life. I understand that and let him off the hook slightly. I just told him to be upfront with them from now on. That was that, at least I thought so. A week ago on Sunday, I got a message from the 24-year-old asking if I was happy with myself, that I would never replace his late wife, and that if she was still alive, he'd choose her over me every time. She even said that he only kept me around for my money and something to stick his dick in. I ignored it, but I can't say that it didn't affect me. When you're in my position, all these points are ones you have to work through, and it's not easy to get over those insecurities. Feels like a knock in the teeth when they're used against you. I mentioned it to him, and he comforted me and reassured me. He said he'd set boundaries with her, and I'd never have to hear from her again. Fine by me. That was until I found my car with whore and grave robber smeared in red paint. I had saved for this car for a year, and it was expensive, very expensive. The tires were slashed, and the windows cracked. I asked the store a few doors down for their CCTV camera footage of that night, but it was blurry and didn't catch much. It did manage to catch half a license plate, though in the color and make of a car. It was his late wife's youngest sister's car. I told him I was filing a police report, and he asked me to hold off until he talked to them first. I told him no, but I would if they paid for the damages and apologized to my face. He set up the meeting for last night, and it didn't go well, to say the least. Everyone was shouting. The sisters told me they, yes, both of them, had nothing to be sorry for and that I should leave their family alone, including my fiancé. Their family told him that it wasn't fair to him to be lonely forever, and that he'd hoped they'd be supportive of him finding love again. They told him he was betraying his late wife and that he never loved her if he'd marry someone else. They didn't have a problem with him having a new girlfriend because he'd realized she was the only one for him and get tired of me. Now that hadn't happened. They were putting their foot down. The youngest told him to tell me that they were right and that he'd never love anyone like his late wife. My fiancé broke down at the table. I picked him up and made us leave. I told them I'd be filing a report and suing for damages, and the next time they saw us would be in court. When we got back and calmed down, I gave him an ultimatum. Either he cuts contact, or we call off the wedding and go our separate ways. I wasn't going to live my life with this harassment and someday subject my children to their bullying. He said they would never bully a child, but I shot him down and said he didn't expect any of this either. He called their father, who was fairly chill about it all but still defending his daughters. They say I shouldn't control him and that I'm horrible for cutting them off. I don't know what to do. I can't live like this and I don't think I should have to, just because we're getting married. Comments where OP has replied. Comment 1. Is the ring he gave you the same one he gave her? OP. No, the ring is actually my late grandmother's engagement ring. He asked my father if he could give it to me when he asked for his blessing. OP. They play D&D together once a week, and now I'm panicking. Comment 2. Did they continue to play after she sent that message to you? OP. No, he didn't attend this week's session, to my knowledge. I just met the players as they're in the same campaign with 3 other people. I don't know what goes on there, and after what people are saying, I don't think I want to. Comment 3. Why do you even want to be with him when there's drama? OP. I see what everyone is saying, but it's not easy to turn off love for someone. I'm seeing it now. Obviously, I don't want to be harassed and my things ruined. I would prefer all this to be social, but that's not the world I live in. If it were easy to flip the switch, I would have started packing on Sunday when I got the message, and he would have flipped the switch at his late wife's funeral. I may have been too patient until now, but that doesn't mean I'm weak. This is the crossroads, and I'm ready to take whichever path I have to. Let's hope he is ready too. Comment 4. Where are his parents in this? OP. They were older parents in their late 40s when they had my fiancé, so they've retired, and he never wants to bother them with anything. I doubt they even know about any of this. I might bring up that he needs to get their input because the way they're treating him is gross and wrong. So they wouldn't treat children that way. Comment 5. But he's okay with them treating you that way? OP. He never said that. I think I hit a nerve when I mentioned children and got defensive. He didn't want children until he met me, and now he really wants to be a father. Update 1. March 19th, 2024. Hey everyone. Just a mini update to clear some things up before I have a discussion with my fiancé either later today or tomorrow about my ultimatum. I didn't sleep at all yesterday or the night before, for obvious reasons. There's a ding on my phone at least once an hour from them saying one thing or another, mainly the 19-year-old, and I don't know what they've told people, but I've got a message from one of their uncles and grandparents calling me horrible stuff too. So obviously, they've been spreading what's happened this week and twisting it. I haven't blocked them because I want to gain as much evidence as I can for the inevitable case, regardless of any outcome with my fiancé. I will be suing and filing a criminal case for harassment and vandalism and looking for a restraining order. I just haven't had the mental fortitude to do so yet. I'm hoping my fiancé will help me. I haven't spoken to my fiancé since the argument at the table other than to tell him they go or I do. It was my choice to give him a couple of days space to come to terms with everything, and I will contact him when I'm ready. All of this, from the first message till now, has been a week. It's a huge weight to contemplate leaving people you've known for 15 years and who you grew up with. He did set hard boundaries with the sister from the coffee shop, as I've seen the messages. He said, paraphrasing, you have no right talking to OP at all. If this is how you're going to behave, she doesn't deserve this and you've gone too far. Why are you being like this? And she responded with more name-calling and back and forth. He ended by saying not to message me again and to make sure everyone else does the same. I was happy with that. At this point, only one person in that family had an issue, to my knowledge, so it was silly to have him cut all of them off. It may not be enough for some, but it was enough for me to feel safe and comfortable. For those saying he needs therapy and counseling, he's already getting it. He's been getting it since before we even started dating, after an incident at work. I don't know about any of their family though. The first time I had a conversation with any of them was that night. Some people are wondering what his late wife died of, and it was a botched weight loss surgery where she died of sepsis. People were wondering if he was somehow the reason behind the surgery, hence the family's insane reaction, but he was not in the slightest. He likes bigger women and wouldn't pressure something like that onto her, speaking from experience. I also want to clear up the not calling the police about the car thing. It was entirely my idea to not file charges in exchange for a face-to-face apology and damage payment. He only wanted me to wait so that he could talk to her to see if she regretted it and then have her father pay the damages. At the time, we thought it was just the 19-year-old that smashed up my car, not both daughters. Neither of us wanted to ruin her life. When I found out it was both of them, it was full steam ahead. Thank you all for your messages, and hopefully, I'll have a positive update for you tomorrow. Edit. I chose for him to take this space apart. It's not him being indecisive. I said to take time and that I'd reach out so that his decision is thought out. It's for me. I don't want to be chosen only to be 3 kids down the line and stuck in a resentment-filled marriage. It's for me. Please understand that. I'm moving house definitely and moving away potentially. Some comments where Opie replied. Comment 1. Where's their dad and what is he saying? Opie. I haven't heard from him, but I did hear the conversation between my fiancé and him after the ultimatum. He didn't call me names or anything, but just tried to get my fiancé to make me drop the charges because he knows them, and this would derail their lives, especially the 19-year-old who is in college. Comment 2. I think this is just an opinion that he let them get away with murder after his eldest died, just an opinion. But I don't see how him not giving Opie an answer yet makes him horrible, especially since she told him to leave her alone. Opie, you're 200% correct. I have told him not to contact me until I feel he's had enough time alone to really choose. He may have chosen me the second I issued the ultimatum. I don't know because I want this to be a thought-out decision. Otherwise, it'll lead to resentment. Comment 3. Just to be clear, an apology won't cut it anymore. Opie, not a chance. Like I said, I will be filing charges and a lawsuit. I just hope my fiancé will support me in that because nobody should have to do it alone. Comment 4. Is it been a week of no contact with him? Opie, I'm sorry. A lot of people are getting confused on this, and I'm wondering where I went wrong. It's been just under 2 days of no contact with my fiancé. Not a week. I got the message from her a week ago on Sunday. If he's willing to cut them off, I choose to salvage the relationship. If not, I'm resolved to leave. Comment 5. Has he been helping them financially? Opie. No, I control the finances, and there's no chance our salaries go into a shared account, etc. Comment 6. How did they get your number? Opie. It's through Facebook Messenger. Update 2. March 20th, 2024. Well, what a wild morning I've had. My fiancé came over bright and early this morning, and I've never been so damn tired. You may want to take a seat because this will be long. Sorry in advance. First of all, I want to set the record straight here. A lot of people are coming for my fiancé over not cutting them off from the get-go, which I don't think is fair. He's a very mild-mannered, calm, and calculating person, and that's who I always knew he was. Nothing has changed. If he had been Rocky Balboa and flipped the cafe table shouting obscenities, he would not have been the man I fell in love with. He did exactly what I expected him to do and exactly what I was comfortable with. You may be attracted to other things in men and expect other things, and that's awesome, but not me. I texted him saying I thought it was time to discuss this, and he was back at home not a half hour later. He'd been staying with a friend a couple of nights. We had no contact. We sat on our bed to talk because my back is sore from all the packing, and I wasn't going to force myself to sit at the table. Before we even got to talking, he asked if we could cuddle for a minute. It definitely took some of the weight off, and we were able to talk like a couple and not awkward strangers because, regardless of some people's beliefs, we do love each other, and it took me a very long time to feel confident in that fact. Before anyone calls me a doormat again, no, I was still sure I would stick to my ultimatum. The first thing I asked was if he felt he had enough time to make his decision, and he said he didn't need time. He was very shocked and bewildered at how so much could change in just a week and how everything he knew was shook up that he couldn't think and went numb. He did apologize that he didn't take a more defensive stance at the cafe, and he doesn't want to make excuses for it. An explanation was that he genuinely didn't expect such a vitriolic response. He hid the engagement because he knew they weren't over his late wife's death and would be upset at the news. It wasn't like I would feel upset by them not knowing, which I wasn't really. He's known these girls since before they were in double digits, and he would never have thought them capable of it. Came so far out of left field that he froze. I asked him if there was any possibility that either of them had a thing for him, and he looked very confused and disturbed. I said how I've had people tell me it's not uncommon for siblings to do this after loss, and he thought on it. Turns out you were right. He said the 24-year-old, about 8 months after his late wife's death, made a move and tried to kiss him. He immediately left and told her mother about it. Mother and father are divorced now but weren't then. She was a minor at the time and messaged him saying she would be 18 soon, so it wasn't a big deal. Her mother made her see the school counselor and didn't allow her to be alone with him for a while. It was years ago, so he'd forgotten it even happened. He said he was sure that wasn't the case now because it had been so long, but I'm not so convinced. Not that it matters anymore. He opened up his Facebook and gave it to me to read. The 24-year-old had been messaging him, which he ignored. She ranged from telling him off to crying and saying how betrayed the family was to trying to manipulate him against me. He said he was sure that he needed to put them behind him and had been thinking it on and off since he proposed but couldn't bring himself to do it. After this week, the fire was lit, and he knew what he had to do. It was all just abstract until suddenly it was very real. He asked me how I've been coping, and I told him I felt like I'd done everything right, but somehow things turned out worse than if I'd been the jealous type and stopped their contact at the beginning. I tried to be understanding and put in so much effort to be secure in myself and our relationship, only for everything I worked on to be thrown in my face like I was a mistress that was cheating with him. He didn't blink the entire time and just listened. He said he should have been more observant and realized I was struggling with this so that he could help me, but I've always been the strong one, so he neglected to, and he'll do better. As I've said in a few comments now, his parents had him in their late 40s and are retired. He hates to involve them in negativity, but I was stunned when he said he's been talking to them about this since the first Facebook message. They were very understanding, but his father took a tough love approach. He said the best quote I think I've ever heard. "Get your act together before the jig is up." They offered to come stay for a while and help us move. I don't think that's necessary, but I really appreciated the thought. On the subject of moving, I made it clear that I would not be living in this house any longer than I had to, and he completely agreed. His parents offered to find us a place in their state if we wanted to have more of a support network, and I'm honestly considering it after all this. They're only a state away from my own family, so we'd be a lot better off. His job is remote, and I should be able to find work there easily enough. I've been in contact with a friend who's a mechanic, and they've quoted me between $1,000 to $2,000 for the damages, but that's in a cost estimate as a discount. A few people have said to get a real statement and to shop around. The real cost is between $4,000 to $5,000, and that's just for the noticeable damage. My friend thinks they've done something to the engine though. Thank God I couldn't drive it anywhere. He thinks I may be entitled to a replacement car altogether. If so, I will be sure to sue for it, and that's not going to be cheap. After all the emotional things were discussed, he mentioned when would I be comfortable enough to go to the police. I made clear he was okay with that or go on my own. He said the sweetest thing I've ever seen him say, that this is what needed to be done, and he wasn't going to let them continue. He'd done enough to try and shield them, but he wasn't going to let it come at my expense. I'm currently in the bath frothing and bath bombs, but we'll be going to the station as soon as I'm done. He's downstairs right now printing out the new quotes from the mechanics and the messages the 24-year-old sent him over the past couple of days so we can go prepared. People have said that nothing will come of it, and you may be right, but I have to try. Hoping my local police don't have anything better to do. It's a small town. To finish, I made a point of asking again if he would cut them off where I had to go. He didn't miss a beat and said that they're no longer going to be a part of his life, even if I decided to leave. He did ask for one last meeting to say goodbye to her parents and to put a close on that part of his life and to explain to the girls that this is not my fault but his decision. After seeing how cruel they were capable of being, after that we would block them on everything and move forward. I was completely fine with that. So there we have it. Writing all this out and being able to talk to people about everything has been both helpful and a good distraction from the dumpster fire that was my life, and everything worked out as well as I could have hoped. We'll see how his meeting goes with them. I'm sure they won't be very happy about it, but that's not my problem. Thank you all, and I'll update after they've met up. Some comments where Opie replied. Comment 1. Why does he want to meet with the girls? Opie. I think he's trying to protect me retroactively. He feels awful that I had to do it on my own for a bit, for lack of a better term, and he wants them to know it's his decision and not mine so that they leave me alone. It won't work, but I appreciate his sentiments. Comment 2. Why does he need to give them closure? Opie. It's not for them, it's for him. He's losing a stage in his life that took up 15 years. I won't begrudge him for how he closes it. Comment 3. Have them meet in a public place. Opie. We discussed this and it'll be taking place at the same cafe as the last one. My mechanic friend will be at a nearby table, and it will be recorded. He's offered me to go, but I'm debating it. Comment 4. Have him record the convo. Opie. He's going to record it and my friend is going to sit at a nearby table to film. Update 3. March 25th, 2024. Hey all, so seems I've been naughty because I got temporarily banned on here for 3 days. In chat, someone was calling me every derogatory and sexist term imaginable, but I was put in timeout for defending myself. I appealed, but the appeal took the ban time anyway. Oh well, sorry this update is taking so long for reasons stated above. So we drove down to the police station with our block of paperwork and had a couple of hours talk. They were so sweet about everything. As some of you expected, they did say I should have come earlier, but they didn't really care because it was only a few days. They said that it often takes people about this amount of time to actually file charges if they weren't an immediate threat or danger. So, unless someone was about to throw punches, I handed them everything, and it looks like I've got plenty of evidence. They'll be contacting my insurance on my behalf to get the ball rolling and so they can come to do a check of my car themselves and then they can open a claim with me if I want. They're not filing a claim. They're just notifying about the criminal damages. I've filed criminal charges for harassment and vandalism, and they'll notify me with more details about my restraining order this week. My fiancé told the police that he was planning on meeting with his late wife's family and asked if that would contradict my case. And they said no. We're not married at the time of filing, so legally we're two separate entities in the case or something. So my car is totaled. My mechanic friend, I'm going to call him Tom because I can't keep saying my mechanic friend. So Tom and his partner at the shop did a full check on my car, and this is the damage they found. Shattered windshield, for slashed tires, 2 broken windows, paint, obvious. I think an unknown substance in the engine oil, battered bodywork. They said with this amount of damage I should just go for a new car, so that's what I'll be doing. If anyone is curious, it was a Volvo. I'd always wanted one and managed to buy one new 2 years ago. Either they get me a new car if they're set back about $60,000, either way I'll be alright. The amount classifies the vandalism as a felony, so they could be looking at jail time too. My fiancé met with the family on Saturday, and Tom sat by the window. I currently live in a one-party consent state, so as long as my fiancé consents, the recording can be used in my case. While it may not be as drama-filled as some of you may want, it was still pretty stressful to see. They met at the same cafe that we did before, and Tom sat a few tables away. My fiancé arrived after their father and before them, for the best, because they managed to have a calm conversation for once. My fiancé told him how he was feeling, and Phil was very understanding but still trying to minimize. He was saying things like, you know they miss LW, and they'll come around and just need time to come to terms with you moving on. He kept trying to initiate paying for the damages, but my fiancé wouldn't talk about it until the sisters arrived. It was like butter wouldn't melt with the 24-year-old, but the 19-year-old came in like the Tasmanian devil. My fiancé didn't acknowledge anyone until it had all settled down, where then he said this would be his last meeting with all of them, and they'd be going their separate ways. He turned to the girls and said that he would miss who he thought they were, but the way they could treat people horrified him, especially me. He said that this was all him and they needed to accept that I was not to blame. He even said that it was me who offered the apology in exchange for not filing charges. The 19-year-old then interrupted, asking what charges and that no one was going to charge them for barely touching a car. She was a deer in headlights when he asked what they'd done to the engine oil, and the two looked at each other. Seems they didn't expect me to find it out. Cue up the grueling 24-year-old. She actually tried to touch his hand and told him he had to stop me pressing charges, because this would ruin her and interfere with the 19-year-old's college. He said it was too late, and the cops should be issuing a warrant soon. It can take a few days. I thought it was an instant thing, but apparently not. This is when their dad got involved again and said for everyone to calm down and fix this like adults now. He wants his girls to be adults. I see. He asked if my fiancé would convince me to drop the charges in exchange for that apology and he'd pay the damages. When my fiancé said it was $60,000, the eyes he gave to those women would shave the hair off a cat. The video wasn't the best, but I swear I could see the color drain from their faces. I may sound awful, but I enjoyed it. Call me what you will. They kept going on about apologizing and that they'd pay, but he just said it was too late and he was done. He tried to be civil, but they were the ones that wouldn't let it go. The 24-year-old actually asked him to set up a meeting with me so they could get to know me and put it all behind us. He didn't reply, and after the silence, they piped up again like, so she won't even meet us, so she's behind all this because she doesn't want us around. We'll see about that. Not using exact quotes because I don't know if I'm allowed, so not risking it. Things like that. They went on, and frankly it was funny more than hurtful, but they did incriminate themselves more and more for my harassment case. And the nail in the coffin was when the 19-year-old said, if we can do that to a car, imagine what else we could do. That, my friends, is both a confession and a threat of bodily harm. My fiancé said one loud stop before wishing Phil well and telling the girls not to come near me. He then got up and left. That's where the recording ends because we wouldn't be able to use anything afterward anyway. As for moving, we're pretty much all packed up and have a truck coming on Friday. We'll be staying with his parents until we find a place. We're looking at buying this time but might get an RV in the meantime so we're not all stepping on each other. I doubt his parents would mind at all, but this is the last update for a while. I think I have a wedding to finish, a venue to change, new invites, etc. and less than 2 months to do it. Send help. But thank you all for being ears and helping me get through this, if only to distract me from ruminating and digging a huge mental hole. A question from the comments. Where is their mom in all of this? Opie. I've never met her. I think she moved after the divorce, but that's about it. Now on to the next story. Story 5. Wife betrayed me by maintaining a close relationship with my best friend's cheating widow, despite knowing the pain it causes me. My marriage with my wife, Mary, 31F, feels like it's unraveling at the seams. I just have so much anger, disgust, and resentment inside me, to the point that regular, everyday living feels impossible. I want to scream all the time, and it feels like I'll never be my carefree self again. Yes, I'm in therapy, and I've told my wife I really think we need couple/marriage counseling, too. She's thinking about it. This is long, so if you can be bothered to read it, buckle in. TLDR below. My best friend, Ben, was my ride or die. We met when we were 5 and were inseparable since then. We were there for each other during all of life's big moments and turns. His place turned into my second home when my parents went through their explosive divorce when I was 11. I was there for him and mourned with him when his younger sister died of cancer when we were 15 and she was only 10. You name it, we worked through it. He was the only one to not freak out on me when I decided to drop out of college to pursue a trade. There was never a moment where either of us were worried about the other's reaction, or what they'd say or think. Ben was the type of guy people knew could make anyone feel better, regardless of the situation. He always knew what to say and what you needed, even if you didn't agree at the time. He's the best person I've ever had the privilege of meeting. The world was a better place with him in it. I unfortunately know I have to put this in here. No, Ben and I were never in love with each other like that. We were really close best friends, SL brothers. Ben met his wife, Sally, in his junior year of college, and I knew Sally was going to be the greatest love of his life. She was so open, warm, and adventurous, like Ben. She had a smile that lit up the whole room and effortlessly made everyone feel like her best friend. Everyone, including myself. I looked at them as that perfect couple everyone knows. They got married 2 years into dating. Ben always told me how excited he was to love, hold, and protect her forever. All the ways he wanted to make her happy. He showed his love for her every day in his words and actions. I was so happy for him because I thought she did the same. I helped her plan his surprise 30th birthday party, where he was reduced to tears upon seeing the hours she spent making him a Mario Kart Rainbow Road-themed cake. They talked about children, holidays, rescuing animals, growing their own fruits and vegetables. Sally quickly became a sister to me and became very close friends with Mary. The four of us went on countless holidays, helped each other through life's challenges, went on at least one double date to Fortnite, etc. About 5 months ago, I woke up to 5 missed calls from Ben between the hours of 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. the night before, and I just had a feeling something really bad had happened. I called out of work and drove straight to his place. Sally had been cheating on Ben pretty much their entire relationship. When I confronted her and asked how she could do such a thing and why get married in the first place if you're going to cheat the entire time, she broke down and told me it was more like living a double life. Sally was / gay. She'd known since she was a teenager but never felt like she could come out because of her conservative family. She met Ben and fell in love with him and counted on her feelings for women just somehow going away. She said she genuinely loved him as a person and life partner, but that secret part of her only grew stronger and louder over the years. She casually dated and hooked up with women, telling Ben she was hanging out with friends from her hobby/sorority groups. He only found out the night he'd called me because one of the women Sally was seeing wanted to take their relationship further and freaked out when Sally broke up with her instead. This woman showed up to their house late at night and told Ben everything. Ben was absolutely shattered. He gave everything to Sally and loved her wholeheartedly, and it wasn't even with the real her. She claimed to love him, but I can't help but think she was using him. She lied to everyone, let us think she loved and adored Ben as much as he loved her, all so that she could have her cake and eat it too. I was quick to tell Ben he deserved better, but Sally apparently begged on her hands and knees, told him she really did love him, and that she was willing to do anything to make it better. She would never talk to any women ever again. They could move somewhere new and start fresh. All that bull crap. Ben fell into a deep depression because he realized he never knew the real Sally, but he did really love her. He agonized over what to do until he got hit by a drunk driver while out on a late-night walk 2 months ago. I won't go into how it felt to lose him. I'm sure you can all imagine. It was made worse by having that a-hole crying at his funeral, crying like he really was the love of her life and she was the perfect wife. It was the first time in my life I ever wanted to hit someone. I couldn't believe the audacity she had to show her face around Ben's loved ones, especially the ones that knew the truth. Mary knows how I feel about Sally, and I thought she understood that Sally is dead to us. I know I can't dictate who a person should/can be friends with, but if I had a mutual friend with Mary that shattered her as much as Sally did to me, I'd cut them off with no question. I can't be friends with someone who hurts my loved ones like that. About 2 weeks ago, I came home from a work trip early, and Mary was consoling Sally in our living room. I lost my shit, asked them if they were having an affair, screamed to the point of crying. I asked Mary how she could have Sally in the living room where we have a photo of Ben hanging on the wall. Sally tried to apologize to me. I looked at her crying face, and it was like a switch flipped in me. I immediately stopped crying and yelling, and I just looked at her and said, "The biggest injustice here is that you're here while Ben is in the ground. If the world were fair, I'd be able to press a button to swap your places, and I'd do that in a heartbeat. You might be able to trick my wife into feeling sorry for you, but you're dead to me. I see what you really are, trash. You tricked Ben into falling in love with you so you could pretend to be mommy and daddy's good little straight girl while whoever you wanted on the side. I can't even fathom or quantify your selfishness. If I woke up tomorrow and I was you, I'd never get out of bed again. Mary says I was cruel, and I guess I was, but it was my truth." Apparently, Sally hasn't left her house since the confrontation. It's to the point she's lost her job because of not going into the office. The thing is, I don't feel bad about it. I think it's the least she could do, and I hope she continues to not exist in my world. Mary knows I feel this way but still goes to Sally's place to bring her meals and help clean up the place. It honestly disgusts me. We've had many explosive arguments about it, and for the first time in our marriage, I feel like we might not recover from this. We both feel like we've seen a new side to each other, and we don't know if we'll be able to move past it. I write this here because we've kept this situation to ourselves. Other people in our lives know something is up, but I've been too afraid to ask. Update 1. A further thank you to people who reached out to me and shared their experiences losing a best friend. I'm sorry you guys lost your best friends. 2. It's like a sledgehammer to the chest that won't dislodge itself. On to the update. It's only been a week, but it's felt like forever. Mary couldn't handle the fights and disagreements anymore and packed her bags the day after my post. I knew this was probably for the best and didn't have it in me to argue or fight for her to stay. I just asked, "Are you going to Sally?" To which she just sighed and shook her head at me before leaving. Her eyes had nothing but exhaustion and disdain inside. And to be fair, I'm sure mine were the same. The town I live in isn't that big, so I've had a few friends reach out to me that they saw Mary at Sally's place, or that the two were seen grocery shopping together. I wake up every day to an empty house, knowing Mary is at Sally's looking after her, asking if she's okay, cooking her meals, cleaning her house. She hasn't called or texted me at all other than to answer my call last night with, "I'm not going to talk to you until you apologize to Sally," and hanging up when I try to explain myself. I know I'd be lying if I said I felt bad for what I said to Sally at all. There's no point in hollow apologies, and I especially don't think there's a point if there's nothing left to fix in my marriage. Mary has made it clear where her loyalties and priorities lie. I just don't understand how she can go from holding me while I cried in her arms to choosing Sally over me and ignoring me. My therapist is advising me to let myself just feel my feelings and process before making any big life choices. And she's probably right, but I've lost all respect for Mary. I never would have thought she'd betray me this way. I lied awake last night when I suddenly had the thought, what if Mary came back on her hands and knees begging and apologizing? What if she gave me the best apology she could possibly give me for this situation? What would it change? It breaks my heart, but deep down I feel like it wouldn't change anything. There are some things that can't be forgiven. There were a few comments and DMs asking if Mary and Sally could be having an affair or if Mary knew about Sally before everything exploded. These questions did keep me up when all of this started going down, but now I can't bring myself to care. My life doesn't make sense anymore, so another cluster detail wouldn't really change much in the grand scheme of things. I've drafted a text that could be the last text I sent to Mary, and it goes as follows. Mary, your priorities and loyalties in this situation have been made very clear to me. I don't know if you want to try to save our marriage and the life we've built together, but at this point, I don't think there's anything left of it to save. You abandoned me during what I can only hope is the worst time of my life. You've invalidated my grief and anger for what the woman who's been lying to and betraying us for years, the woman who used and strung Ben along for years. I don't recognize you right now. It's like I went to bed in a world that made sense one night and woke up in a nightmare. I think the only way forward here is for us to get lawyers and communicate through lawyers. I will not be leaving my house. If you want to collect your things, please let a relative know so I can arrange that with them. I can't believe this is happening. I never thought this would be what we've become, but choices have been made. I've been reading and redrafting this message over and over again for hours. Sometimes it breaks my heart, and other times it's like I'm an outsider watching myself in a bad movie. The worst thing is I don't even know if Mary will care about it. Update 2. I've had a few people ask in comments and DMs about what I said to Mary and our arguments to make her leave. I didn't put that in here originally because we were honestly just going in circles again and again. It was nothing short of exhausting. Mary kept on insisting that Sally is still one of her closest friends and that she's not going to abandon her because she made a mistake, to which I'd remind her that her mistake was to make the choice again and again to lie to Ben and everyone around her, robbing Ben of the chance to find someone who would truly love him the way he deserved while sleeping with and dating women while they were married. I can't imagine how scary it must be having to hide such a big part of yourself, but not everything can or should be forgiven. She could have been honest early on, and she would have had a group of friends who'd have her back and support her however they could. But instead, she chose to string Ben along. If Ben had died thinking he had the perfect marriage he thought he had, things would be different, but he didn't. He died lost and in pain as a direct result of Sally. The feeling lost and in pain I know. His death was an accident. Nobody could have seen coming. Mary thinks and claims I'm callous a-hole, and I think she should have higher moral standards for her friends now. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My child-free marriage fell apart when I revealed my traumatic past, and my husband decided he could fix me with a baby. So I left him. I'm Lisa, 29, and I've been married to Jonathan, 32, for 2 years. We dated for 3 years before tying the knot. From the very beginning of our relationship, I made it crystal clear that I didn't want children. Jonathan always said he was fine with that, and I believed him. I grew up in a dysfunctional family in a small town in Ohio. My father passed away in a car accident when I was 4, leaving my mother to raise me and my younger brother, Tom, 26, alone. She struggled with depression and alcoholism, often neglecting us. I had to step up and take care of Tom from a young age. As I got older, the responsibility became overwhelming. By the time I was 10, I was cooking, cleaning, and helping Tom with his homework while trying to keep up with my own studies. My mother would disappear for days, leaving us to fend for ourselves. When she was home, she was often drunk and verbally abusive. I remember one particularly bad night when I was 12. Mom came home drunk and started yelling at us for leaving dirty dishes in the sink. She threw a plate at the wall, narrowly missing my head. Tom was crying, and I had to comfort him while cleaning up the broken glass. That night, I promised myself I'd never put a child through what I experienced. Throughout my teenage years, I became more of a parent to Tom than a sister. I'd wake him up for school, pack his lunches, and help him with his homework. I even attended his parent-teacher conferences when Mom was too drunk or absent to go. It was exhausting, and I often felt resentful, but I knew Tom needed me, so I pushed through. My own education suffered as a result. I was often too tired to focus in class or complete my assignments. My grades slipped, and my dream of going to college seemed to be slipping away. It wasn't until my high school guidance counselor noticed something was wrong that things started to change. Miss Johnson, my counselor, took me under her wing. She helped me apply for scholarships and encouraged me to open up about my home situation. With her support, I managed to graduate with decent grades and got accepted to a state university with a partial scholarship. Leaving for college was both a relief and a source of guilt. I was finally free from the constant responsibility, but I worried about Tom. I made sure to call him every day and sent him care packages when I could. It was during this time that I really started to think about my future, what I wanted from life. The thought of having kids of my own filled me with anxiety. I knew I couldn't handle the responsibility and didn't want to risk repeating the cycle of neglect. The idea of being tied down by children made me feel panicky and trapped. I decided then that I would remain child-free. After college, I moved to Chicago for work and lost touch with my mother. Tom was old enough to take care of himself by then, and we maintained a close relationship despite the distance. He understood my decision to be child-free and supported me, even when our extended family criticized my choice. When I met Jonathan at a friend's birthday party, I was immediately drawn to his kind eyes and easy laugh. We hit it off right away, talking for hours about our shared love of travel and photography. On our third date, I told him about my decision to be child-free. I was nervous, as previous relationships had ended over this issue. To my relief, Jonathan said he understood and was open to a life without kids. He told me he'd never felt strongly about having children and valued his career and freedom too much to be tied down by parenthood. We discussed it several times throughout our relationship, and he always assured me he was on the same page. As our relationship grew more serious, I introduced Jonathan to Tom. They got along well, and Jonathan seemed to understand the close bond one shared with my brother. He never pressured me to reconnect with my mother or judged me for my strained family relationships. Jonathan's family, on the other hand, was picture perfect. His parents had been happily married for 40 years, and he had 2 older sisters, both of whom had children. At first, I was intimidated by their close-knit dynamic, so different from my own family experience, but they welcomed me warmly, and I grew to love spending holidays with them. When Jonathan proposed after 3 years of dating, I was overjoyed. We had built a life together that I loved. We both had successful careers, traveled often, and enjoyed our freedom. I felt like I had finally found someone who truly understood and accepted me. Our wedding was small but beautiful. Tom walked me down the aisle, and Miss Johnson, my old guidance counselor, was there to celebrate with us. Jonathan's family went all out with the planning, and, for once, I felt like I was part of a real, loving family. The first 2 years of our marriage were blissful. We bought a cozy apartment in the city, adopted a cat, and continued to enjoy our child-free lifestyle. We never argued about kids or felt pressured by each other to change our minds. Last week, everything changed. I finally opened up to Jonathan about my childhood. I'd never shared the full extent of what I went through before. It was emotionally draining, but I felt relieved to finally tell someone everything. I told him about the night spent comforting Tom while Mom was passed out drunk, about missing school to take care of the house, about the constant fear and anxiety I lived with. Jonathan held me as I cried and seemed very supportive. He told me how brave I was and how much he admired my strength. I felt closer to him than ever before, grateful to have such an understanding partner. The next day, I came home early from work, hoping to surprise Jonathan with takeout from our favorite restaurant. As I approached our apartment, I heard Jonathan's voice through the open window. He was on the phone, and something in his tone made me pause. I overheard Jonathan talking to his mother. He was telling her about my past, which hurt me. I had shared that in confidence. But what he said next shattered my world. He complained that if he'd known the real reason I didn't want kids, he wouldn't have married me. He called my decision selfish and said he was considering leaving me. I stood there frozen as Jonathan went on to say he had always hoped I would change my mind about kids. He told his mother he thought my childhood trauma was something I could get over with time and therapy. He even suggested that having a baby might heal me and make me forget about my past. I was devastated. I'd always been upfront about not wanting children. Jonathan had years to voice any concerns or leave if he wasn't truly okay with it. Instead, he pretended to be fine with my choice while secretly hoping I'd change my mind. I didn't confront Jonathan immediately. I was too shocked and hurt to form coherent thoughts. I quietly entered the apartment after he hung up, pretending I hadn't heard anything. Jonathan greeted me with a smile and a kiss, acting as if everything was normal. It made me feel sick. For the past week, I've been living in a daze. Our entire relationship feels like a lie now. Every memory, every moment we shared, is tainted by the knowledge that Jonathan wasn't being honest with me. I keep replaying conversations in my head, wondering if there were signs I missed. I'm not sure how to move forward. Part of me wants to confront Jonathan and demand answers. How could he lie to me for so long? Did he ever truly accept me? Or was he always waiting for me to change? Another part of me wants to pack my bags and leave without a word. The betrayal feels too deep to overcome. I've confided in my best friend, Rachel, 30, about what I overheard. She was furious on my behalf and offered to let me stay with her if I decide to leave Jonathan. But the thought of ending my marriage is terrifying, even though I know I can't stay with someone who would deceive me like this. I'm also worried about how Jonathan's family will react if we split up. They became like the family I never had, and the thought of losing them hurts almost as much as losing Jonathan. Will they understand my side? Or will they see me as the villain who denied their son the chance to be a father? For now, I'm going through the motions of daily life, pretending everything is fine while I try to figure out what to do. Jonathan has noticed that I'm distant, but I've blamed it on stress at work. I'm not sure how long I can keep up this charade. I feel like my world has been turned upside down. The one person I thought I could trust completely has betrayed me in the worst way possible. I don't know if I can ever trust Jonathan or anyone again after this. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since I overheard Jonathan's phone call with his mother. I still haven't confronted him directly, but I've been watching his behavior closely. He's been acting extra attentive and affectionate, which now feels manipulative given what I know. I decided to test the waters by bringing up the topic of children again over dinner one night. I casually mentioned that a colleague of mine had recently gotten her tubes tied. I told Jonathan I was considering doing the same to ensure I never get pregnant. His reaction was very telling. He immediately tensed up and tried to discourage me from such a drastic step. When I suggested he could get a vasectomy instead, since it's a simpler procedure, he looked horrified. He made excuses about it being too expensive and unnecessary. This confirmed my suspicions that he's been hoping I'd change my mind about kids all along. I've also noticed Jonathan has been initiating intimacy much more frequently since our conversation about my childhood. It's as if he's trying to get me pregnant before I can go through with sterilization. I've been making excuses to avoid sex, which is clearly frustrating him. The betrayal runs deeper than I initially thought. Not only did Jonathan lie about being okay with not having kids, but it seems he's been actively trying to manipulate me into pregnancy. I feel violated and furious. I've started quietly making plans to leave. I reached out to Rachel and explained the full situation. She's offered to let me stay with her for as long as I need. I'm also looking into my options for divorce, though the thought of ending my marriage still feels surreal. Last week, I had lunch with Tom. I couldn't bring myself to tell him everything, but I did mention that Jonathan and I were having some issues. Tom could tell something was seriously wrong and kept pressing for details. I ended up breaking down in tears in the middle of the restaurant. Tom was furious when I finally told him what I'd overheard. He wanted to confront Jonathan himself, but I begged him not to. I'm not ready for a confrontation yet. Tom reluctantly agreed but made me promise to call him if I needed anything. I've also been in touch with Miss Johnson, my old guidance counselor. She's been a constant source of support throughout my life, and I needed her wisdom now more than ever. She reminded me that I'm strong enough to get through this and that I shouldn't compromise on something as fundamental as having children. At work, I've been struggling to focus. My boss pulled me aside last week to ask if everything was okay. I managed to hold it together and blame it on some family issues, but I'm worried my performance is suffering. I can't afford to lose my job on top of everything else. Jonathan's family invited us over for Sunday dinner last weekend. I almost didn't go, but I was afraid of raising suspicions. Sitting around the table with them, watching Jonathan play with his nieces and nephews, was torture. His mother kept making comments about how great Jonathan is with kids and how we shouldn't wait too long to start our own family. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to avoid breaking down. I've been having nightmares about being trapped in a house full of crying babies, unable to escape. I wake up in a cold sweat, relieved to find myself alone in bed. I've been sleeping in the guest room, telling Jonathan I've been having trouble sleeping and don't want to disturb him. Part of me still wants to confront Jonathan and hear his side of the story, but I'm afraid of what other lies might come out if we have that conversation. I don't know if I can handle any more betrayal right now. For now, I'm focusing on protecting myself. I've hidden my birth control where Jonathan can't find it, and I'm being extra vigilant. I never thought I'd have to guard myself against my own husband like this. The trust between us is completely shattered. I've started looking for apartments, just in case I need to move out quickly. I've also been slowly gathering important documents and sentimental items, storing them at Rachel's place for safekeeping. The hardest part is pretending everything is normal. I go through the motions of being a loving wife, cooking dinner, asking about his day, watching TV together in the evenings. But inside, I'm screaming. Every touch, every kiss, feels like a lie now. I know I need to make a decision soon. I can't live like this indefinitely, but the thought of confronting Jonathan and ending my marriage is paralyzing. I've built my entire adult life around this relationship. Starting over at 29 feels daunting. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm trying to stay strong and remind myself that I deserve better than this. I deserve a partner who truly accepts me for who I am, not someone who sees me as a project to be changed. Update 2. Things came to a head last night. Jonathan cornered me in the kitchen and demanded to know why I've been so distant lately. He accused me of having an affair, saying he couldn't think of any other reason for my behavior. In my anger and frustration, I blurted out that I knew about his conversation with his mother and his true feelings about having children. Jonathan initially tried to deny it, but when I told him exactly what I'd overheard, he broke down. He admitted that he'd always wanted kids and thought he could change my mind over time. He said he loved me too much to let me go when we were dating, so he pretended to be okay with not having children. I was furious. I reminded him of all the times I'd explicitly stated my stance on having kids. I asked him what his plan was if I never changed my mind. Jonathan hesitated, then confessed he thought an accidental pregnancy might force me to reconsider. That was the last straw for me. The idea that my husband would try to trap me into parenthood against my will was unforgivable. I told Jonathan our marriage was over and that I'd be moving out immediately. Jonathan begged me to reconsider. He promised to go to counseling and said we could work through this, but I knew there was no coming back from this level of betrayal. I packed a bag and left to stay with Rachel. The next day, I went back to the apartment while Jonathan was at work to gather more of my things. As I was packing, I found a journal hidden in Jonathan's desk drawer. I know I shouldn't have read it, but I couldn't help myself. What I found made me feel sick. Jonathan had been documenting his attempts to get me pregnant for months. He wrote about replacing my birth control pills with placebos, which thankfully didn't work because I had an IUD he didn't know about. He had plans to take me on a trip and forget to pack condoms. He even considered poking holes in the condoms we did use. Reading those entries made me realize how close I had come to being trapped in a life I never wanted. It also made me angry at myself for not seeing the signs earlier. How could I have been so blind? I've contacted a divorce lawyer and started the process of legally ending our marriage. Jonathan's family has been calling nonstop, trying to convince me to give him another chance. His mother left a particularly nasty voicemail, calling me selfish and accusing me of leading Jonathan on. I've blocked all their numbers. Some of our mutual friends have suggested I'm overreacting and should try to work things out. They say every marriage has its rough patches and that Jonathan's desire for children is natural. But I know in my heart this is the right decision. I refuse to stay with someone who would lie to me for years and try to manipulate me into a life I don't want. Tom has been my rock through all of this. He helped me move my things out of the apartment and has been staying with me at Rachel's place to make sure I'm okay. Having him here reminds me of our childhood, how we always protected each other. I'm grateful to have him in my life. I'm still struggling with feelings of betrayal and anger. Some days I can barely get out of bed. Other days I'm filled with a sense of relief that I discovered the truth before it was too late. It's a roller coaster of emotions, but I'm taking it one day at a time. Update 3. It's been 2 months since I left Jonathan. The divorce proceedings are underway, and I've moved into my own apartment. It's been a difficult adjustment, but I'm slowly starting to feel like myself again. Jonathan made several attempts to win me back in the first few weeks. He sent flowers, wrote long apology letters, and even showed up at my workplace once. Each time, I made it clear that reconciliation was not an option. Eventually, he seemed to accept that it was over. His family, however, has been relentless. They've tried reaching out to Tom and Rachel to get to me. Jonathan's sister cornered me at the grocery store last week, trying to persuade me to give Jonathan another chance. I've had to threaten legal action to get them to back off. Some mutual friends have taken Jonathan's side, saying I'm being too harsh. They argue that his desire for children is natural and that I should have expected him to hope I'd change my mind. I've distanced myself from these people. I'm grateful for friends like Rachel who have stood by me through all of this. I've started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of Jonathan's betrayal and my childhood issues. It's bringing up a lot of painful memories, but I know it's necessary for healing. We've been discussing my fear of commitment and trust issues, which stem from both my childhood and this experience with Jonathan. The hardest part has been coming to terms with the fact that the man I thought I knew never really existed. The Jonathan I loved was a facade, carefully crafted to be what he thought I wanted. The real Jonathan was willing to lie and manipulate to get what he wanted, regardless of my feelings or choices. I've had moments of doubt, wondering if I'm making the right decision. There are nights when I miss the comfort of our shared life, the inside jokes, the familiarity. But then I remind myself of the betrayal, of the journal entries detailing his plans to trap me into pregnancy, and I know I'm doing the right thing. Last week, I ran into Jonathan's mother at a cafe. She tried to talk to me, saying Jonathan was miserable without me and that we could still work things out. I stood my ground and told her that her son's actions were unforgivable. I explained how violating and manipulative his behavior had been. For the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. She apologized for her previous behavior and said she hadn't realized the full extent of what Jonathan had done. Despite the pain and anger, I know I made the right decision by leaving. I refuse to compromise on something as fundamental as having children. I deserve a partner who truly accepts me for who I am, not someone who sees me as a project to be changed. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life as a single woman. I've started taking photography classes, something I'd always wanted to do but never found the time for when I was with Jonathan. I'm rediscovering old hobbies, spending time with supportive friends, and learning to trust my own judgment again. It's not easy, but I'm hopeful for the future. This experience has only reinforced my decision to remain child-free. I'm more certain than ever that it's the right choice for me. I've scheduled an appointment to discuss permanent sterilization options with my doctor. I never want to worry about an accidental pregnancy again. Tom has been talking about moving to the city to be closer to me. While part of me worries about him uprooting his life on my account, I can't deny that having him nearby would be comforting. We've always been there for each other, and I'm realizing more than ever how important that bond is. As for my mother, I received a letter from her last month. She's in rehab again and wants to reconnect. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Part of me wants to give her another chance, but I'm also wary of letting her back into my life. My therapist and I are working through these feelings, and I know I don't have to make a decision right away. For now, I'm taking life one day at a time. Some days are harder than others, but I'm proud of myself for standing up for what I believe in. I know there's a long road ahead, but for the first time in months, I'm excited about what the future might hold. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Fiancé went completely insane and got a secret face tattoo, blocking my number and ghosting me when confronted about it. I am honestly stunned right now. My fiancé, Kim, I have just learned, is completely insane. She took some days off work this week sick and avoided seeing most people in person. She claimed she was feeling sick and just wanted to stay home alone. She has never given me any indication that she would lie about this in the 6 years we've been together. No one in her family had any worries because she was a stable individual who would never do anything crazy. She got a face tattoo. She took 3 sick days from work to recover from the fact that she got a face tattoo. She told no one of this plan beforehand. I have never, in our time together, been talked to about tattoos by Kim. She showed no indication that she was even interested in getting any. I was not even the first to learn. Her sister visited her because she got worried after Kim canceled meeting with her for lunch on her 3rd day sick and got the grand reveal. She didn't tell anyone beforehand because she didn't want to be talked out of it and hid the results because the swelling and redness were so bad that we would react badly and not be able to understand the artistic meaning. Kim is Asian American. She got Japanese symbols going down her forehead and under her eye. I don't know the meaning of them. I don't really know if I care to know the meaning of them. Kim's parents are Japanese immigrants, according to her sister who was nice enough to inform me of this whole debacle. This is a big no-no in Japanese culture. Tattoos have links to crime and are looked down upon. Her parents are beside themselves, and that is a whole other set of drama I can't even begin to approach. Kim talked to me last night about it and acted offended and started a fight because I told her it was absolutely insane of her to do this. She works a public-facing job. She talks face-to-face with clients in the financial industry. The minute her boss finds out, the career that she went to school for will be over. She actually didn't consider her job or family or me at all and decided a long time ago she was going to express herself freely without any concerns. I'm worried about her right now. This is not normal. She blocked my number after our fight and is ghosting me and her sister because we're trying to help. But dear Lord, this is far beyond me. I cannot comprehend what I'm even supposed to do right now. Kim's lost her mind. Is there any chance I will be happy married to this woman who went and got a face tattoo and hid that fact because she knew we would all talk her out of it? Dear Lord, I really need to run, don't I? Wow, this got some attention, huh? I read through the replies, but I can't really respond to all of you, so I'll just update here. The engagement is pretty much off. Kim has told me she never wants to see me again, and I woke up this morning with her ring and a box of stuff I gave her on my porch. I don't know what's going on with her. Her sister and family have been trying their best, but nothing on their end is working. I brought up to her sister the idea this is a mental breakdown, and they're looking into getting her help. It's painfully slow considering Kim is not responding to anything and is refusing to talk to anyone. I really don't know what to say here. I guess to answer some questions. Kim is 29, and I'm 28. In the 7 years I've known her, she has never acted like this at all. She had a good relationship with her parents, and while they were a bit overbearing at times, they supported her in going to college and getting a career rather than starting a family. From what I've gathered, they probably would have been fine with any tattoo she got as long as it was not on her face, neck, or hands. Even then, this kind of behavior is as far from Kim as I could have imagined. She just lost her mind out of nowhere. It's not like I can do anything about it either. She's blocked my number and does not want to see me. I'm just at a loss for words. One day I'm engaged and the next I'm not, and my ex has a face tattoo. Update 1. About 9 months ago, my ex-fiancée, Kim, got a face tattoo without telling anyone. This was just the start of her doing everything she could to ruin her life. She broke up with me and called off our 7-year relationship when I questioned why she did this. She worked in a client-facing job for an incredibly large financial institution and was let go within a month of showing back up for work after getting the tattoo. I kept in contact with Kim's sister hoping for some news. They tried to get her help as they thought she was having some kind of psychotic break. However, she eventually called the police on her own family, claiming they were harassing her. After that, I decided to just walk away. Kim didn't just destroy her own life. When she broke up with me, I felt numb. I knew this wasn't Kim doing this. I wanted to believe, deep down, that Kim was always like this. Always this impulsive crazy who would ruin her life by getting a face tattoo. I tried to convince myself that I had not lost a wonderful woman who I had spent 7 years of my life with. However, the person who made these choices was not Kim. The woman who told me over the phone she hated my guts for not supporting her. The woman who wrote she hated me and only ever stayed with me out of pity. That was not the woman I asked to marry. That was not Kim. That was someone who I came to find out was having a mental breakdown that resulted in months of bad decisions that will affect the rest of her life. The day I walked away and told her sister I could not deal with it anymore was the worst day of my life. It hit me like a train. The numbness and denial of what I lost hit me all at once. I almost quit my own job and moved back home to my parents. I can only thank my boss for being so understanding that she let me take 4 weeks off to deal with what happened. She and the rest of my team went far beyond what should ever be expected of coworkers and management. It makes me realize how close I was to leaving a job I actually enjoy. I never moved on from Kim, but I came to accept what had happened. I thought I was okay until 2 weeks ago. I got a call from Kim. She had blocked my number and done everything she could to remove me from her life. My mind just blanked when I saw it was her calling. Picked up and it was actually her. We didn't talk. I did not know what to say to her. We decided she would come over to my place and we talked. The tattoo is still there, but she's covering it up now with makeup. She says when she has the funds, she's going to look into getting it removed if possible. She had lost a lot of weight since I last saw her. She's not been able to find a new job. She'll probably need to move to a new city for that. She wasn't the Kim I had fallen in love with. She was like a shell of her. Something just wasn't there anymore. That used to be Kim. She told me what had happened. The year leading up to the tattoo was awful for her. The stress of everything seemed to pile up more and more. I'll respect her and keep much of what she told me secret. However, the thing that is important is that she secretly started doing methamphetamines to keep her performance up at work and to deal with everything, and one day she just, out of nowhere, decided she hated everything about her life. She explained why, at the time, she wanted the tattoo. It doesn't really make much sense, but a lot of what she was thinking at the time didn't. And from there, she just lost control of everything. I won't talk about what happened after she disappeared, but it is not pretty. There are things she did that will follow her for the rest of her life. It explained a lot, but it did not make things any better. We talked for nearly the entire night. She didn't leave my place till almost 4 a.m. Since then, she said that she wants to try and get back together with me. She admitted she knows things cannot be the same, yet she wants to try. I haven't talked to anyone about what I'm about to say yet. I've held off on talking to Kim about it because it feels selfish, but there's something about the way Kim acts, about the way it affected my life that irks me. When we talked that night, she said that I was lucky she cut me off. I was lucky I didn't get put through any of this. I was lucky that my crazy ex wasn't at my door screaming or showing up to my work and causing a scene. She acts like my life wasn't affected at all. I told her what happened after she left, how much it hurt, how I almost quit my job and moved across the country. Her response was dismissive, like because I didn't go through with it, I don't get to complain. She acted like because I was not the one with a tattoo on her face, I don't get to act like it had long-lasting effects on me. She didn't even apologize for the explicit and hateful note she left with my things when she returned them, or for the phone call where she called me manipulative and selfish who only wanted her for her body, or even just for breaking up with me. She knows she was wrong to do it, but it's almost as if she's acting like because she had a breakdown, I can't hold her accountable for what she did to me because it wasn't long-lasting. I texted her last night saying how hard it was for me when she left. She ignored it entirely and tried to move on. No acknowledgement at all. I don't know why, but it hurt me. It hurt me so much. I feel like I did back when all those emotions finally hit me after she left. I wish she had just never come back into my life. Now I wish I didn't know what happened. I wish I hadn't picked up the call because it hurts, but a part of me feels like I'm being selfish or complaining too much, that I don't get to feel this way because I'm not the one who had the mental breakdown. Update 2. I learned yesterday that my ex, Kim, died of a drug overdose Sunday. I'm still processing the news. I guess we broke up 2 years ago after Kim got a face tattoo out of nowhere. I have some other posts on this account about that if you want the full story. Kim reappeared in my life about a year ago after ghosting me and essentially becoming a ghost. She wanted to get back together with me, and I stupidly considered it and let her get a foot in the door. She claimed she was clean, but she wasn't. It was obvious she was still using meth, and my guess is she was still using fentanyl. After I finally declined to get back together with her, she slashed my tires after causing a scene at my office. Luckily, she's been out of my life for 6-ish months now after some cop put the fear of God in her after she broke the restraining order. I've not heard much about Kim since then, thankfully. Last I heard, she was wanted on a warrant and was hiding low across state lines. Yesterday, though, Kim's sister called me to let me know she was found dead Sunday morning. She wanted me to hear it from her instead of through the grapevine. I appreciate it. Despite everything, Kim's family have been, not kind but tolerant to me. Kim's parents are quietly cremating her, and there won't be any ceremony. Seems that stealing and abusing her family since she started doing meth has made them just as detached about her as me, or maybe they've already mourned the loss of their daughter long ago, and now is just the end of whatever remained. Right now, I don't know how to feel. I feel like I should be sad. I knew Kim for 7 years. I was with her for 6. I was engaged to her. I lost my virginity to her. She was the first person I truly loved. I used to sit up with her and talk about the family I wanted to have. I wanted Kim to be the mother to my kids. She sat up with me as I cried when I heard the news of my mother's death. At one point in my life, she was the most important thing in the world to me, and I don't feel anything. When Kim left me, I was devastated. When she came back into my life, she made me feel a combination of emotions I can't even describe, and now hearing the news that she's dead, I don't feel anything. I don't feel numb. I'm not in shock. I just am lacking any emotion towards this event at all. I feel like I should feel something, right? I still miss Kim. Not the Kim that died Sunday, not the Kim that stalked me, but the Kim I met, the Kim I fell in love with, the Kim that died when she started to do meth. I still feel sad when I think about her, but knowing this other Kim is dead just makes me feel nothing. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.